All right, can you guys hear me now? It appears that you can, but my fancy freaking microphone is not doing jack shit, which I'm not excited about. Okay, now it's working. Okay, can you guys hear me now? The microphone should be up and running. Please put something in the chat box. Tell me that you can hear me. I am going to add Mr. Will momentarily. He looks like he's more or less ready. Will, give me an okay sign if you're ready. Will is ready, and you guys can hear me perfect. All right, I actually got here an hour early. I checked everything. I set up my camera. I set up my microphone. Everything. Then Will got and jinxed it.
Well, what can you do?
Yeah, I don't know. He sort of has a permanent invitation to come visit with me at this channel, and I'm beginning to think maybe I should rescind that and see if that helps with the hardware issues.
Maybe, huh?
All right. Before we kick off, and I see there's a question about Leupold 2 to 10. Will, did you come prepared?
I did not come prepared.
Grasshopper did not train you well. Like, yeah, I mean, now I have to drink for the two of us. I mean, if I have a liver failure, it's your fault.
Well, I'll be there to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of pieces. So I'm very happy. All right. Peated single malt Irish whiskey. Black Pits. Highly recommended. Except for the, people who don't drink like Will. Apparently. Okay, so before we kick this whole thing off, I want to spend half a minute on the YouTube troubles du jour. And what YouTube troubles du jour are is that they are, again, going after all the different gun channels, a bunch of channels. Got strikes, got banned, got kicked out. There's been all sorts of fun stuff happening. You couldn't screw on a suppressor on a gun or in a video because that was modification. You can't take a 30-round magazine, put it in a gun because that's modification, and a super scary high-capacity magazine. There was all sorts of shit happening. There was a huge outcry. Couple of the more egregious things, like not being able to screw a suppressor on a gun or something like that, seems to have rolled back. But how long it lasts, I don't know. Basically, it happens every 2-3 years, sometimes more often. They push us a little bit more, see what's going to create the most outcry. They introduce 5 particular obnoxious features. There is a huge outcry. They roll back on 2, but 3 are staying in place, right? Another 2 years. It's going to be lather, rinse, repeat. So I have a very small channel. I don't think anybody cares too much. They're going after larger channels first. But if at some point I vanish into thin air, it's not voluntary. And you will still be able to find me on darklordofoptics.com, and everything I do on this channel is also copied on Rumble. So rumble.com and darklordofoptics.com, they are part of the same organization. They run on their own servers, and nobody can pull their servers from them. And they claim they believe in freedom of speech. So to be fair, YouTube is a private company. I'm not going to enforce my rules on them. But on the other hand, there's only so far I'm willing to go in moderating what I want to say. So keep that in mind. Okay, with that out of the way, let's see if Will and I learned anything about SHOT Show reporting from last year, when it took us about 4 attempts to find the wrap-up.
Yeah.
How many was it?
Yeah, 3 or 4. 3 or 4,
yeah,
I would
something
say.
like that, yeah. So we tried to do an overview, and it went to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah.
On the other hand, this is supposed to be done in more or less a Q&A format. So if you guys have questions, post them in the chat box, and we'll address that first. And barring that, we'll just kind of go down what we remember from the shot. So we do have the first question from Mr. Nate Spence. Thoughts on Leupold 2-10 Mark V HD?
Yes.
That's the booth where Will and I actually went together. So I'm going to let Will voice his opinion, and I'm going to tell him he's wrong. So the usual.
Sounds about right. So I remember the 2-10 kind of prior to SHOT Show and what the anticipation was for it and kind of building up to it. And I think that as Ilya and I discussed, that scope, a 2-10 in general, is in a very niche position. Especially something like that that's got a bunch of elevation, locked turrets, more tactile turrets, not something that is more of a hunting scope. It's got a parallax adjustment and the whole thing. Looking at it at SHOT, I liked it. I think, are some people going to complain about the weight? Sure, because it's 24 ounces, I believe, which is only a few ounces heavier than the 3-18.
A few ounces lighter.
Yeah, or excuse me, a few ounces lighter. And upon initial release, it seems like the reticle selection isn't great, but we did at SHOT learn that there are going to be additional reticles for this particular Mark V coming down the pipeline. So I think once those get implemented and hopefully they're illuminated, that could push this scope into a really good position for the niche that it fills. Like, am I going to see this on every single hunting rifle out there? No, I don't expect that to happen, but I do think that it will fill a role that really at this point doesn't have many competitors in a true 2-10 in something that's that size and form factor with that much elevation and things like that. There's very few players in that market space right now. I liked it. They had it on like a fake AR, like little plastic AR, but I felt like just looking at it, lifting it up, putting it down, getting behind it, eyebox was pretty good. And other than that, it's a very Mark V. I mean, the elevation, windage, and parallax are all the same from a Mark V. So across the line. So if you guys have ever messed with a Mark V, it's the same controls as that with a smaller objective.
Will's favorite windage turret. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that was something that we both expressed. I think when we looked at it, like, I don't know why you guys keep doing this to the Mark V, but it is what it is at this point.
Yeah. I will say this, on this scope, I don't care about the windage turret. I will never use it after zeroing. So.
That's fair. That's fair. And, even with the bigger ones, a lot of guys are holding for wind anyway. So after you zero it, not a huge deal, but I think it's just kind of annoying in general. Like every time I got to look at them, like, this doesn't make sense. Why? But other than that, the illuminated TMR in a scope like this, I think is okay. Obviously the TMR as a reticle as a whole is pretty old, but for what this scope is designed for, I don't think it's terrible. But I am looking forward to the new reticle that they kind of described to us is coming down the pipeline in a few months.
They have not announced what it's going to look like anyway, so we shouldn't either, just as a fair warning.
Yeah, absolutely. But be on the lookout regardless. But I saw it in the TMR illuminated, and I think the TMR is still pretty capable for what this scope is intended for.
Okay, I think that's a fair point. I largely agree with Will on this one. I went in with comparatively low expectations, and Leupold pulled a fast one on me. They did it in two ways. First of all, the guy I often talk to there, he's a marketing guy. His name is Sean Skipper. He's a really good dude. I like Sean, right? But this time around, he decided he doesn't feel like getting beaten up. So he went and got me John Snodgrass, who's a product line manager at Leupold, who's done a lot of different things there. I've known John forever and a day. John is the second surliest guy at SHOT Show. I get the crown. But so John and I get along well. He's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. We don't always agree, but I have a lot of respect for the guy. So that immediately made me think, okay, they're taking this scope seriously. And talking to John a little bit is, you can kind of understand why they did it. First of all, Mark V scope line for Leupold has been quite successful. Will and I occasionally rag on it, but by and large, I like the Mark V. For the weight and for the money, it's generally a good scope. I don't like some of the things Leupold does. We've described it ad nauseum. But the 2 to 10 has been in the plans since the beginning. They just haven't gotten to it because they were busy making scopes. And one of the things about John is that John is not known for bullshitting. I don't know if have you met John before, Will?
I had met him briefly at a couple of NRL Hunter matches, but not had an extended conversation with him.
John is not known for bullshitting. If he doesn't feel like saying something, he'll whistle out of saying it, but bullshitting is not John's thing, right? So I believe him when he says this. And all they wanted to do, they wanted to make with the Mark V line a series of scopes where just objectives are different and everything from the turrets and backwards is the same. And that's what all of the Mark Vs are. That's one of the reasons why you get this adjustment range, the same nice turrets, same eyepiece, same basic experience. One of the things you get with the biggest complaints about the scope are that it's comparatively heavy at 24 ounces and that the objective is small at 30 millimeters. Well, it's true, but if you want to go bigger, you already have the 3.6 to 18 by 44, right? If you don't need to go bigger, this is kind of an interesting scope. There are some military tenders this is going for, and pretty much every potential MPVO, medium power variable optic tender that originally Leupold would have been going after with a 2.5 to 8 by 36, or Nightforce would be going after 2.5 to 10 by 32, or 2.5 to 10. But when you basically varies SPR, that projects this scope is perfect for. It's comparatively short. It still has very good depth of field because it doesn't have 1x. It can be optimized well. I like that scope, right? So I've been doing this for a very long time. And if there's something obviously fucked up, I'll figure it out after looking at it for about 30 seconds. It's possible to sneak something past me. It's not so easy. I didn't see anything really bad with it, and the strength was significant, right? So when we get it out in the field, my prediction is that low light performance is going to be reasonable, but not amazing.
Right.
Depth of field was really, really good. You do not have to mess with parallax. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, touching on the parallax, even though it's marked, I think at like 50, we were able to get it significantly closer. I want to say like maybe 15 yards.
Exactly. On 10 power.
Yeah.
And because depth of field was so deep. What that means is that if you're trying to slow down and do something really precise, you're going to mess with parallax. If you just need to go and shoot, you basically don't have to do much with the parallax unless you're very, very close or very, very far. For almost everything else, you're basically just going to point and go for it, right? Which is what these kind of scopes are for. Ton of elevation, which for my purposes is great. I'm basically envisioning putting it on a subsonic 8.6 blackout, right? So when I shoot these things very far away, because I'm weird even by Will's standards, where it's a very high bar to clear, it's going to work fine on a 22 trainer, on 300 blackout, 8.6 blackout. It's going to work great on various accurate but lightweight AR-15s. Is it comparatively heavy? Yeah, but 24 ounces. So Vortex Razor Gen 3, I think, is 21 ounces, right? So you're on the same general range as most high-quality LPVOs. Not all, there are a couple lighter ones, but most. I mean, attacker 1 to 8 is, I think, 23 ounces, 22 and a
Yeah,
half,
something like that.
So you're in that same general general size range, except with this one, they could optimize it on high magnifications because they don't have to worry about 1 power. So
Right.
I anticipate that performance between 8 and 10x is going to be substantially better than we typically get from same quality level low power variables because you don't have to worry about 1x. I think it's going to be a compelling package overall. TMR is a perfectly reasonable reticle. I think it'll do well with hunters. The scope should work great with thermals because of depth of field, smallish objectives. All these things help them work well with thermal clip-ons. And for the more tactically inclined people, is going to be a new reticle that I know what it's going to be, and I think it's going to work well for me. So all in all, like I said, I went in preparing to reap them a new one, and I walked out going, okay, that actually ain't bad.
Yeah, and something else that I just kind of wanted to bring to light and actually ask you about it is, so when I look at that scope, I envision putting it on a lighter weight AR-15 with a red dot, so that I can use the red dot for like a true like 1x essentially point and shoot, and then if I need to get into that mid range, I can crank it all the way up to 10 power. And so I've messed a lot with, my buddy has a Razor 3 1 to 10, and I've messed with it a lot on 10 power, shooting 600-700 yards. But I feel like the reticle that they have in there, it obviously is not optimized for 10 power. It's pretty busy there, but this 2 to 10 with a red dot, I think could be an ideal setup for like a lighter weight AR-15.
AR-15, AR-10, yes. When I get it, I'm supposed to get one with a new reticle around June or thereabouts. When I get it, I'm gonna go move it from gun to gun and see, because there are a couple of interesting possibilities. One is 8.6 blackout. Another one is just a accurate AR-15, and I have a couple 6 ARC and 6.5 Grendel that would be very, very good platforms for this gun. I'm gonna go shoot a pig with it. I'm gonna try it in different venues, but what I found is that my most long-range-ish AR-15 is a very accurate 6 ARC, and I commonly have low power variables on it because it's accurate, but for what I use that gun, I don't need a huge amount of magnification. Might be perfect there. Right.
Yeah, and from a competition perspective, so that there's a good amount of gas gun matches popping up, and some of the divisions are categorized based on the magnification that you have on your AR. So one class or division would be LPVOs, which I believe max is 8x or 10x. And then there's another division where I believe it's 15 and under, and then they have an open division where you can just put whatever you want on it, 5 to 25, 735, doesn't matter. So again, something like this where the 10 power is really usable and it's got a ton of elevation, because those gas gun matches are going out to 800 yards, 1,000 at the most, but most everything is 800 and inside. And so something like this scope, I think, could work really well for that and allow you to get into a more comparable division. But guys, I think it would give you an advantage because, somebody that's using a Razor 3 1 to 10 and you're using this at 10 power and they're using theirs at 10 power, I think this is going to give you a little bit of an advantage in something like that too.
Correct. Another thing to keep in mind, so everybody goes, 30 millimeter objective is very, very small. It is. Most low power variables are 24, a couple at 28. Most are 24 millimeters. The difference between 30 and, in terms of the amount of light, the difference between 30 and 24 millimeters is actually surprisingly substantial, right? It's about 56% more, right? 30 millimeter objective lets in about 56% more light than a 24 millimeter objective, right? Because it goes by the area.
Yeah,
it is actually significant a difference. But basically, in other words, I think both Will and I liked it more than we expected to. So we'll see where it takes us.
Yeah, I think you we were talking earlier, well, before SHOT Show, about the scope, and you said something like, I hope they don't Leupold it.
Yeah.
And you know, I will get credit where credit is due. They did not Leupold it. They made it at least from what we saw, initial impressions, they made it a very, very viable Mark V, and I think a good, strong addition to the Mark V lineup.
But I got to coin the phrase. I said they Leopolded it. If it goes viral and John Snodgrass assassinates me, it was him.
All right.
Yeah, again, something I say going viral is not real likely. Okay, I think that pretty much wraps it up for the Mark V. I'm just going to go down the list of questions. All right. Glass on Element Theos versus Razer Gen 3.
Oof.
Oh, well, I have a little bit of an advantage here because I had Theos before SHOT Show, and I had it right next to Razer Gen 3. So I had a chance to look at them side by side.
I only saw the Theos at SHOT Show. After a lot of nudging on Ilya's part, I walked over there and said, okay, let me see what this is all about. And obviously I did a review on the Razer 3, so I have a lot of experience with the Razer 3. SHOT Show is not the best place to judge glass quality and things like that, but there are some things that you can learn. I don't want to speak out of place here because, again, I haven't had an Element Theos outside of a building. All I will say is that I liked the reticle. I think as an overall package, I liked the scope. Control seemed well done as well. The Razer 3 is a really high bar. It is. So I'm not going to say one way or the other how it compares to that, but I do think that it seemingly appeared pretty well done from what I could see inside SHOT. But I'll let Ilya do more of a direct comparison description.
They are in the same league. Razer Gen 3 is a little bit better, not by much. They are direct competitors. They are OEM'd by the same place. Vortex, these specifics of the Vortex design always a little bit different.
Right.
And what all these OEMs do, so Light Optics Works has this new standard 6-36 by 56 design, and all of a sudden you begin to see it from a lot of manufacturers, Zeiss S3, Regia, Bushnell, XRS3, etc. And they're not all equal, right? So, for example, Theos and Razer Gen 3 and Zeiss that I looked at briefly, and I'll do a proper review, they are clearly better than XRS3 to my eyes, for example.
Yeah.
The XRS3 is a nice scope, but it's also a lot cheaper, right? But these three are clearly better. And to me, the S3 and the Theos, in terms of how the optics looks at, actually look very, very similar. And the Razer Gen 3 appears to have a somewhat different eyepiece, very slightly wider field of view, a couple of things. But probably related designs. I really, really liked the turrets on the Theos. I'm not a completely unbiased observer on that because a few years ago, when Element optics was just starting out, we know some of the same people. I got introduced to these guys. I like them. They're young, they're capable, they have a lot of energy. And we were chatting about turrets and stuff like that, and asked if I know anybody who designed. So I hooked them up to a friend of mine who is one of the more prolific rifle scope designers from a mechanical standpoint out there, Andy Schaefer, who was originally with Bender. He is the guy who did a lot of work on 525 and then Aptronica and all that stuff. Now he's an independent contractor, so he does work with quite a few people. And Element seemed to be okay with disclosing that he worked on the turrets, but the design of the turrets is not from Light Optics Works. They don't know how to make a good turret. Vortex turrets are designed by Vortex, and Theos turrets are designed basically for Theos, specifically by an external mechanical designer. They're completely different on the inside, and they're very, very good. I really like those turrets. And I spent a lot of time spinning them. It's not quite a tangent theta, but I don't think you will find a better turret under 3K or under. Honestly, I mean, when I think about it, Tangent is a clearly better turret. DT2 plus Schmidt and the new March in the 5-32, I think is a little bit better. maybe ZCO, but that's pretty close. ZCO makes nice turrets, and they have a new one that I actually liked a lot.
Yeah,
but I don't know. Theos had a nice turret. I ran it blind for 2 weeks, not looking at it, never skipped a click, was never in any doubt. There is a little bit of sound and it's extremely tactile. So Theos is going to be an interesting contender.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would try to get an opportunity to see if they'll let me look at one and take one to a few matches and things like that. And you know, if they do that, then I can give a more appropriate comparison from my perspective. But yeah, I mean, like I said, based on the, you know, what you can tell it shot, it seemed pretty well done. So I'll look forward to seeing if I find any on the firing line at some matches and some other things like that too.
Yeah. They have a few of them out there. They've been running them at matches. The guys who are behind the brand are shooters. So. All right, Zachary Whiteley, Razor Gen 2, Gen 3, Steiner M5, M7, T6Xi. Save some money and go Element Theos for the next PRS bolt gun. I'm not sure where you're saving money because Theos is more expensive than Razor Gen 2. So I will say this: so Steiner M5 and M7, I really like mechanically, optically. I was not super happy with them on high magnification, right? T6Xi I actually like, but I have not done a full test. So between the other ones you have here, I think Razor Gen 3 and Theos are the two obvious choices. Razor Gen 3 I can recommend without any reservations. Well, and I did a whole show on that, how impressed we were with the scope. And the Theos I can recommend provisionally because I've spent a couple of weeks with it. I have not done a full long-term test. Okay, the Razor Gen 3 I've spent a year and a half beating up. Theos I spent 2 weeks with. But I liked what I saw with Theos, and I really like Razor Gen 3. If you don't feel like experimenting, get the Gen 3. If you want something a little bit different, get the Theos. Okay. You with me?
Yeah. I mean, to me, those seem like the two top tier choices. So if those are in your budget, then they're definitely head and shoulders above the other options that Zachary listed. Nothing wrong with a Razor Gen 2, but there's a significant difference between a Gen 2 and a Gen 3. So I would say look at your budget, and if a Razor 3 or a Theos is realistically in your budget, then based on Ilya's preliminary evaluation, I would say if they're close enough to each other, then pick a reticle that you like, and because that's what you're going to interface with the most every time you put your face in the gun, and take a look at some of those other things. If the scopes are so close in performance to each other optically and other things like that, then look at the turrets, look at the reticle, other things like that, and see which one makes more sense to your brain and which you like better.
That's exactly right. So aside from that, like I said, try to get your hands on the turrets. Oh yeah, so one of the things to keep in mind with Theos, it's not the turret I can think of offhand other than Tangent, where both resetting 0 and resetting the 0 stop is toolless. There are no tools involved at all. But Theos is a double turn turret, so it's 12 milliradians per turn, and you get basically 24 milliradians, and that's it. A Razor Gen 3 does give you 3 turns. Now, I can count, other than shooting subsonics far away, I can't recall ever needing 30 milliradian of drop, but
correct.
Maybe you're doing something else. Okay. All right, moving on. Will, this question is for you. ZCO 5-27 versus 8-40 is the difference in the glass, and is the NLE turret does it feel better than the lock-in one?
All right, so first and foremost, it's actually kind of funny that this question comes up because I actually was texting with Nick from ZCO earlier today because I got to, and I know you stopped by their booth. We didn't go together, but so
you just didn't want to be seen with me.
Well, I wanted to stay in some good graces,
Yeah, Jeff wasn't there, and I get along with Nick just fine.
Yeah. So they had they have a new turret that's 10 mils per turn, and it's a NLE, so non-locking elevation. And I told Nick that this is the turret they should have released the scopes with at the beginning of the entire start of the company, to be honest. But
yes, they should have.
so those turrets are fantastic. Unfortunately, those turrets are only going to be available in the 5 to 27 at the moment. They don't have any plans for the 4 to 20 or 8 to 40, but I loved the feel of the non-locking elevation so much that I text Nick earlier today about if I could send in my 8 to 40 to get the conversion done for non-locking elevation. So from a pure competition standpoint, I do like the feel of the non-locking better than the locking, only because sometimes if you're not paying attention and you put a little downward force on the elevation turret as you're dialing it, you can almost kind of like in a stick shift where you grind the clutch a little bit when you start grinding gears.
I thought that only happened with Razor Gen 3. That's what everybody told me.
Yeah, listen.
All locking turrets are the same.
Yeah.
If it can pop up, it can also pop down.
Exactly. And so I've felt that a couple times, kind of essentially grinding the gears that are in there, if you will. And so the non-locking elevation, and it's faster because you don't have to remember if it's locked or unlocked. You just start dialing on a stage. So from a pure competition perspective, I prefer the NLE, and I want to send in my 8 to 40 for that conversion. Now, as far as the 5 to 27 and 8 to 40, is there a difference in the glass? So I have both, right? And I've had my 8 to 40 for about a month now, and I will say this.
Shouldn't talk.
Well, yeah, just don't turn the camera around to your room full of scopes, and we'll be fine.
I put most of them away. There's less than 50 scopes here.
Okay, well, I've got 4 above my head, and that's it. And then the other 2 are downstairs. But so as far as the 8 to 40 versus 5 to 27, I think glass-wise, they're pretty similar. What I will say is I have found the 8 to 40 to be actually more comfortable as far as iBox and other things in the typical shooting magnification for competitions in that like 15 to 20 power, even cranking it up to 25. And I even shot a few on 40 power to see what it felt like, and it wasn't bad at all, even at 40 power. But in that 15 to 20, it was so easy to get behind, and it's right there. And so it just feels a little more comfortable. And maybe it also has to do with the parallax. The 5 to 27 was extremely forgiving, and so is this one. But this one parallax is a little bit lower than the 5 to 27. So I don't know. Maybe it's a combination of all those different things that make the 8 to 40. The 8 to 40 is my favorite scope in their lineup from the 4 to 20, 5 to 27, and 8 to 40. And it just feels the most comfortable. It's a little short on elevation compared to the 5 to 27. So it really depends on what you're going to be doing with the scope. If you need a lot of elevation, the 5 to 27 is going to give you a little more. But as far as just from a pure glass perspective, they seem very, very similar, very, very neck and neck. So, at that point, I think it'd be somewhat of a personal preference, but there are some advantages to each one, I would say.
So looking at I have not tested 8 to 40. I've looked at it a little bit, and I plan to do a comparison this year since Stanger has a new 7 to 35 and all that, and I'll borrow an 8 to 40 from somebody, maybe from Will. So one of the things that Zisio did very intelligently with the 8 to 40 is that once, just like Leupold, they didn't change anything from the turrets backwards. They slapped on a different objective. And when you slap on a different objective and you want a little bit more magnification and all sort of stuff, what they did is that you notice that scope is a lot longer. The focal length of the objective is a lot longer. And what it does, it makes optical performance a little bit easier, and on the same magnification, the depth of field is going to be a little bit more forgiving. It's one of the reasons you find that it's a little bit easier to get behind. Okay, they didn't try to make the scope short, which was very smart on their part. It's a competition scope. If it's 2 inches longer, 2 inches shorter, nobody gives a rat's ass, right? As long as
Right. Yeah, it's actually the longest scope that I own. It's longer than a tangent. Not by much. I think like 0.2 inches or something like that, but it's a very long scope.
Yeah, it's about 1.5 inches or 2 inches longer than a 527, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that makes it a little bit more forgiving. As far as the turrets go, so I went to ZCO with the threat of bodily harm. I'll never stop making fun of them. You guys haven't met me. I'm not very concerned about bodily harm. Just saying. But I went and touched all the turrets they had there. And this 10 milliradian per turn and elite turret is the best turret I've made to date.
Mm-hmm.
I generally like their turrets, but the 10 mil is good. Between the 15 mil, was it 15 or 14 that they have?
15 on the currents.
Yeah, between the 15 locking and non-locking, I think the non-locking is a little bit better feel, but to me that did not seem like a huge difference. But increased in spacing for the 10 milliradian per turn turret was, I think it made a big difference, honestly. If I was buying a ZCO, I'd get whatever model has those 10 milliradian per turn turrets. Basically.
Yeah, same. So yeah, even though I've got a 5 to 27 and 8 to 40 and things like that, once the I will be getting a 10 mil per turn that initially is from when I spoke to them, they said current plans are just to get as many 5 to 27s out there with the 10 mils per turn and then possibly look at the other ones. But for now, it's only going to be the 5 to 27. And once I get that, currently the 8 to 40 is on my main competition gun, but that 10 mil per turn 5 to 27 will go on my competition gun on my main one because those turrets are that good to me. I mean, they really, to me, they take the feel and the spacing. And actually, what's interesting is they were able to rearrange some of the internal geometry, I guess, how they briefly explained it to me, to get a few extra mils of elevation. So now it's 37 mils total on the 5 to 27. So I think that's like an extra mil or mil and a half.
Yeah, I'm sure you care deeply about 35 to 37 mils.
Yeah, I need all 37, when I'm
when you're
my...
shooting your, 6 GT at 400 yards, yes.
Yeah, I need all the mils, all of it.
That's the part that I find so amusing. So every once in a while, somebody releases a scope that doesn't have. It's usually MOA, guys. It does not have 100 MOA. I can't use it. How far do you shoot? As far as 300. I go, okay. Yeah. Sometimes, like once a year, I get to a range. It has 1,000. So what caliber are you shooting? 6.5 Creed, 1,000 yards. Okay, that's 8 milliradian of a drop. You haven't made just one turn in your life.
No, never. Yeah, no, it's pretty funny. The few sort of competitions where that extra elevation does come in, and I think it was a good move on their part, is in the rimfire world when you get into NRL 22X, which is the longer distance 22 stuff, and then air guns. Longer distance air guns, you want some more of that elevation. So I think that's a great move on their part. They also told me that that's going to trickle into the 8 to 40 as well. So right now the 8 to 40 is a little short on elevation comparatively, and the 5 to 27 will still have the most, but they'll still be able to squeeze out a little bit more from the 8 to 40 as well in future versions. So that was pretty exciting. But as far as the question, Eli and I both agree. The NLE 10 mil per turn to me is a big difference.
Okay. All right. Let's just see you, Mr. Nate Spence. Anything new in the thermal world? Oh, actually, quite a few things. Did you look at the thermals, Will?
Just what you showed me. So I'll leave most of this to you. Being in California, we don't really get a lot of experience with thermals because there's not a whole lot of practical application for us, at least those of us that aren't professional door kickers. So, but
wait a second, you don't own a thermal?
No, I wish. I know, it's a shame. I know.
Drive me into alcoholism.
I know, but
we not even to spy on your neighbors in Hollywood Hills.
Listen.
Oh no, for that better night vision.
Yeah, and to be honest, I probably wouldn't want to see what they're doing anyway. It would probably give me nightmares. So I'll leave them to their own devices.
I don't know if I ever told you guys a story. Some years ago, I worked in Westlake Village in California, and I was doing a comparison on a bunch of fairly high-end spotters. So I drove out into the hills there. It's just another side of the hills from Malibu. I set up my spotters, and I'm looking, there's some birds, trees, bushes, and there are some sporadic houses out there separated by but lots of space. $20 million homes, $30 million homes. God knows what they cost. So I'm looking at the spot, and I see a building. I go, oh, great. So maybe there's some structure in the wall, something to see. I was maybe a mile and a half away from it. I look at the building, at the house. There is a window. There are no blinds because they assume nobody can see them. And there are two people doing it. A very well-known actress and not her husband. Anyhow. To date, I don't know if it was her house or his house, or they were just abusing somebody else's furniture. But anyhow, they did not give me nightmares, just for the record. just saying. The thermals, actually quite a lot. So it was the first time I got my hands on the IRA HD thermal, the 1280 by 1084 with 75mm lens, the $18,000 thermal scope, which was very, very good. If people really want me to test it, I can. I wasn't planning on it because at 18,000, it's as nice as it is. I'm not hugely interested. Generally, it was sort of a coming out party for some high resolution thermals. ATN had their 1280 by 1024 thermal, and just to understand, 1280 by 1024 is 4 times more pixels than high resolution thermal now, 640 by 480. And ATN is going to have 3 of them with different lenses, all under 10 grand, which is a big deal. But the problem is that the prototype they had there was a little bit half-baked. I've been around thermals a lot. So my day job is thermals, right? My field expertise is thermal imaging, targeting, that kind of stuff. So I've been around thermals a lot, and I looked at it very, very carefully. I mean, I wish they slapped it together a little bit more carefully before they brought it to shot, but at least they had something. I think the performance is there, but they need to do a lot of tuning up and optimization to pull it out. So I'm cautiously optimistic, and that definitely changes the price paradigm. Pulsar had an HD thermal binocular with a kind of a monocular that goes to the two eyepieces with built-in laser rangefinder and all that. Actually, I didn't like the performance of that one too much. If I didn't think they wouldn't risk it, I'd say it's a 640 by 480 that's upsampled. But maybe it was also a bit half-baked. Who knows? But the most memorable thermal things for me were not the very high-end, high-resolution stuff, right? Because until it comes down in price a bit, I really don't care. The most, and I think you were there with me at IRA, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there was this one rifle scope that's just 640 by 480, normal VGA resolution. And the clever stuff was in the lens. It had a switch power lens where you can rotate the lens a little bit and switch between 25mm focal length and 50mm focal length. So you use 25mm for scanning, wide field of view. You're going to shoot something, you switch to 50mm. And that, to me, is the bigger game changer than the high resolution. High resolution microbolometers, thermal imagers, is just a matter of money. Right? I've shot with a 5-megapixel microbolometer. Okay, not available for civilians, barely available for the military, but they exist, and I've seen them. I've used it. It's amazing. But one of the things that I really want to see, I want to see this wizardry, how they did it in the lens, and if it holds up and if it works well. I fully intend to review that one. And if it works, if it doesn't lose point of aim and all that with the lens changes, that will immediately jump to the top of my list of recommended thermal rifle scopes. Because being able to optically, without losing resolution, switch between wide field of view and narrow field of view is a very, very big deal. The funny thing, it doesn't get all that much news. The guy who is sort of a director there at IRA for the US, he and I have both worked in the thermal world for many years. We've known a lot of the same people, and we were chatting. We're both shocked this was not getting more publicity. It is a big deal. Being able to do this switch lens on something with recoil so it actually works, that's a big deal. Okay. The thermal stuff that got the most news was the one from Holosun, where they're basically doing this fuse stuff over red dot side with the thermal, and another on the red dot side with the night vision. They did a very well orchestrated marketing campaign. But what they had at SHOT Show was sort of prototypes, and nobody at Holosun booth was able to tell me anything about the actual products. Either didn't want to or weren't able to. I don't know. So I looked at them briefly. They were well packaged and small. In terms of imaging performance and all that, they were clearly not done. It did not look great. But once again, it's very early, fairly early prototypes. So we'll see what the production ones look like. The way they fuse, I think that's what they're doing. We just lost Will. Oh, there he is. The way they fuse the thermal with the red dot is, I don't think it's, so Steiner CQT cost a lot of money because they did some very clever ways in how we're fusing the red dot with the thermal. There's another fusion product I'm going to talk about in a moment that also does it a little bit differently because it's hard to do it, so it works during the day and night. And the way Holosun is doing it might not work so great during the day. It might be, during the day, just a red dot. You may not be able to see thermal stuff all that well. So we'll see. But that got a lot of news. iRay, in a different booth, also had the fused red dot thermal called FAST, F-A-S-T, FAST FAL19, FAL19. And that one was actually quite mature, and I really liked it. It's distributed by a different company called VIR. And I got in touch with them, and I told them I want to review it. So as of earlier today, I basically sent them an email explaining how I do things, and that if they want me to, if they're willing to loan me something to review, I'm more than willing to do it. But everything I find, good or bad, and everything gets published. And somehow the chain of emails stopped after that. Maybe the guy was just busy, or maybe he decided that he doesn't want to risk it. Who knows? I don't blame him if he decided he doesn't want to risk it. Because for them, to me, it looked pretty good at SHOT Show, but it's not the same thing as taking it out and actually testing it. And if it's crap, and I call it crap, maybe with nicer vocabulary, it can really hurt them, right? So for them, it's their livelihood. I just talk about stuff. So when somebody doesn't want to have anything to do with me, I totally understand. If they decide they want to risk it, I'm going to review it. It's about $4,000. I thought they did the fusion part really, really well, much better. Those were production units. Holosun stuff was very early prototypes. But iRay is doing a lot of things correctly. I was quite impressed. Bearing has some new stuff built in, laser rangefinder and all that. Pretty good looking sights. I think Bearing on balance probably your bang for the buck leader in the thermal world right now. But in terms of performance, Bearing uses thermal cores from iRay. But in terms of performance and overall packaging of scopes, I really like the iRay branded stuff. Not cheap. It's actually more expensive than Bearing, but quite good. Generally, my semi-standard recommendation for thermals, if you have some money to spend, is Envision. They didn't have anything new. They have a couple things they're working on, but it's not out yet, so I can't talk about it. If you ask me to recommend one thermal rifle scope to just have and use as a general purpose thing, I would say Envision Nox 35, but the dual field of view iRay may become it. So it's not quite identical. I was really impressed. All right, I think what else was there with thermal? There's some company called iAiming. Looked like perfectly reasonable sights. AccuFire, I like those guys. They have a new one, 640 by 480. AccuFire is really interesting in that it's a 35mm lens, 640 by 480 core, and you can use it as a rifle scope or as a clip-on, which I find very useful. iRay also has a new model that does both of those things. I think the new Incendus 640 from AccuFire is very well packaged, and I like those guys. They're hunters, they're shooters. They have good understanding of technology, so I'm cautiously optimistic about AccuFire as well. Thermal, I kind of want to look at. And who am I missing? Well, anybody else? Oh, sorry, Tian, iRay, AccuFire, iAiming. I feel like I'm missing somebody. I wanted to go to Arma site, but I skipped them, unfortunately. Just ran out of time. They have some new stuff coming, but the new stuff is still in development. I know who's developing it, and I saw that, but it was still non-functioning prototypes. All right, if anything comes to mind, I'll bring it up. Okay, Lane Hathaway. Have you seen a Steiner T6Xi yet? Have you?
I believe so. Or maybe not. Which one was the
you
one?
You saw them at the Steiner booth. We were there together.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think I've.
That's commendable. Sorry,
yeah,
I'm a wise ass. I can't stop myself.
I think that's it. Just at the booth.
So I've seen them a little bit more at the booth, but I haven't done a thorough test. They actually look pretty nice. 2.5 to 15 by 50, a little heavy, but it's actually very nicely optimized. 5 to 30 is quite good. 3 to 18 by 56 is probably one of the more interesting ones just because of the unusual configuration. They look like pretty good family of scopes, good turrets. They are getting out there. I don't see people yelling and saying they're crap and that everything's falling apart. So it looks like the rollout went through reasonably well. There's a 1 to 6 there. I think it's a little expensive, but it actually looks pretty nice. They look like very respectable scopes. If I do a comparison with the tangent and stuff, if I can get the Theos back here at the same time, I might do Theos versus T6Xi versus Razor Gen 3 as kind of a subgroup, and then look at new tangent VCO, the new Schmidt 6 to 36, that kind of stuff. The big question for the Steiner T6Xi, it's about $3,000, I think, or something like that. Is it better than the Razor Gen 3, right? Because at $3,000, you have Razor Gen 3. Once again, I'm not talking about discounts. There's always, every time I mention Razor Gen 3, some guy on YouTube tells me how he can buy them any day for $1,900, that kind of stuff. That's less than dealer price, so no. But if you're introducing a scope at $3,000, you need to figure out if you're at least competitive with Razor Gen 3. If you're at least competitive, the Steiner T6Xi has some clever turrets and some other stuff. It's a worthwhile design. But how exactly it stacks up, I cannot yet tell you. Okay. Mr. Ford Cobra. So the gentleman also asked me on my website, any word on tangent 735 having 0.05 mil clicks? Those longer distances could really use it. I emailed the guys at Armament and I just haven't got the response yet. I'm not aware of it. The scopes that we saw had 0.1 milliradian clicks, unless you can remember something I can't. And to me, that's perfectly reasonable. I'm not convinced I am looking for more than that for a variety of different reasons, partly because of very long distances. I'm not convinced 0.05 really makes that much difference. I can't shoot with that precision, and as you start going further out, atmospherics and other things introduce a significantly bigger error than 0.05 milliradian, I think. But if there's demand, they can probably do it. Either way, once they give me the answer, I'll post it. What are your thoughts on 0.05 milliradian clicks? Well,
so there's not too many scopes out there, right? And that have a 0.05 option, if you will, for turrets. And outside of like super dedicated bench rest F-class type of shooting, you really don't see it, because even at the ELR matches that I've shot, I mean, everybody's using 0.1 mil, scopes. They're using tangent 5 to 25, ZCO 5 to 27.
See what you're making me do. I have to drink for 2.
Yeah, I mean,
elderly abuse.
It's all right. I have faith in you. You can get it done for the two of us. Yeah, and even the last ELR match that I shot, I took my 5 to 27 ZCO with 0.1 mil turrets, and never saw a reason for 0.05. And again,
David
really,
Tubb without ever twisting a turret still kicked your ass.
I'm sorry.
I said, and David Tubb without ever twisting a turret still kicked your ass.
Listen, that guy's got a very interesting reticle design that could take up an entire other show.
So he has come early on. He has come on the show and actually explained his reticle here. It's in the archives.
Okay, yeah. So there you go. But yeah, as far as just the general thought, 0.05, I think it has a niche, a very small one, for your super bench rest F class type of shooting. And to be honest, and this is just pure speculation on my part. I've never had this conversation with anybody from Tangent or Armament or anything like that, but I don't know that that's necessarily their market. And I don't know that that's, I mean, if guys are shooting tangents in it, great, but I don't think that that's necessarily a market that they want to target specifically, because neither one of their scopes, the 5-25 or looking at this 7-35, are purpose built for that type of stuff. Could you use it? Yeah, absolutely. But is it designed with that type of shooting in mind? I don't believe so. Otherwise, I think they'd make some other design changes as well, including maybe higher magnification, even above 35 and things like that. So maybe they do it, but I don't know. I would, if I had to venture a guess, and this is just pure speculation again, I'd probably say they wouldn't do it.
The new Schmidt 10-60 by 56 does have 0.05 millimeter clicks. So there's clearly
right.
people who think that they
yes.
did
it. And so I saw that scope and I liked it. But again, so a 10-60 is not really, for some reason, people jumped on it as a new PRS scope. But to me, that's not a PRS scope. A 10-60 is a bench rest scope. So, to me, in Schmidt's lineup, the 5-25 and 6-36 are their more PRS style competition scopes, and then this 10-60 is exactly what you might look for a bench rest F class type of scope with 0.05 as something specifically targeted towards that type of shooting.
So to me, 0.05 clicks, honestly, and once again, I'm not really a competition shooter, right? Intellectually, to me, looking back, the only time I ever really cared about having finer clicks was for kind of a short distance bench rest. It's like with magnification. I use a lot of magnification when I'm not shooting as far away because I'm looking through less air. As I shoot really far away, first of all, we usually try to set up targets that are fairly big, and second, I live in the Southwest. The air conditions here during most of the year vary between hot, crazy mirage or sandstorm, right? So that's basically the two variations we get out in New Mexico, and 2 weeks out of the year, you get out there and it starts raining and snowing and you freeze all your appendages off and crawl home. That's pretty much it. Shooting far away, I can't use that much magnification, and that extra granularity doesn't do anything for me. But once again, there is clearly a market for it. I've been asked more than once, and I think Schmidt, knows what they're doing, and that's why they're giving you a very high magnification scope with fine clicks. So quick aside, Will. So in terms of magnification, what's the lowest magnification you would be ever using during a PRS match for anything? Looking, finding stuff, shooting, anything.
So, I mean, there's been times where I haven't been able to find targets and I've zoomed all the way out to the lowest of whatever optic it is that I'm using just to find something, and then I crank up. But the lowest that I've ever actually shot a target on is 8x. And that was back in the day when I was, I remember shooting an entire match at 8 power when I was still using an old Premier 3-15. And I think that was one of the scopes when I first met you at Angelus. You looked through my old 3-15 Premier. But I remember shooting an entire match with that scope on my gun, and I shot the entire match at 8x, never touched the magnification on it. So that's the lowest that I've ever shot with. And if you can see the reticle, I mean, you have more field of view, so there's that.
Yeah. So I'm generally with you once again. When shooting, I don't typically, for precision stuff, I don't start on 5. but
Mhm.
it would be. But I often will dial to something under 10. It's a front focal plane scopes. I never quite look at what magnification I'm at. I know I'm
Right.
below 10. I'm somewhere in there to just
Mhm.
kind of look at stuff and then dial in a little bit. And I should do most of my shooting between 12 and 15. I don't. I only
Right.
really dial up to look at the conditions or spot for somebody, something like that. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
in other words, on the tangent, I'll get back to. All right, Mr. Nate Spence. Anything impressive about Apex optics?
Oof. Yes. A few things that were exciting. So,
Just
that's
start talking. I'm gonna see if I can find the picture and blast it on the screen.
yeah. So Apex is a relatively newer company for those of you guys that don't know or haven't heard the name before. That I as far as I know, they really came onto the scene last year, and just kind of exploded, especially in the 22 game NRL 22 and things like that. And the cool thing, well, one of the cool things that they had at their booth, aside from the scope, the higher end magnification scope, is a pair of binoculars. All right, 10 by 50, I believe, was the magnification.
12 by 50.
12 by 50, excuse me, 12 by 50. And the
Which
reason
one
these
of us has alcohol-addled brain that can't retain information anymore? Thanks.
see, and this is why I come unprepared, because I don't need any extra, impairments while I'm here, or I might say something even worse.
I can't trust anyone.
But so these binoculars, and I don't say this from a glass snob perspective, even though I've got some Leicas sitting up there, and I've used Swaro NL Pures and things like that. For what the price point of these are going to come in at, were very nice. But not only that, a feature that, at least in the competition scene, we have been asking for forever, like literally years. And I know that a few SHOT Shows ago, Ely and I went around and probably the last few as well, pounding on people's doors, essentially, as like idea salesmen of somebody to do something like this. It has a milling reticle in the scope. And not only that, but one of the more like ingenious things, but it's so simple, that they did with the reticle is, okay, so everybody's like, okay, cool, whatever, you got a reticle inside your binos, right? But as soon as you adjust your interpupillary distance, it's going to go and it's going to go all cockeyed and whatever. They have a rotator on there, so you can rotate the reticle. So once you set the binos to you can rotate the reticle and it's upright. And it was a nice L shape. It had 2/10 increments on one line, and on the other line it was half mil increments. I think it's gonna be fantastic. I mean, we've been asking for something like this, preferably in a 15 to 56, but I'll take a 12 to 50. We've been asking for this in the competition scene for a very long time. And there you go. There's the reticle. Something super simple but easy to use, gives me all the graduations I want. And it's not a horse that just gets in the way. And I can mill my targets, get my wind brackets, all that kind of stuff. I think it's going to be great. I really like it, especially at the price point. I don't know if we're allowed to say that. Can we say that?
He was trying to underprice them. I was trying to convince him to charge more. So,
well, okay, if they come in more expensive than what they told us, blame that guy right there.
There is a reason to my madness. The reason is comparatively simple. I'm a little worried that it's going to be a niche product, and I want him to make money on it so that he makes more of them.
That's fair. That's very fair. I
So
want them to make more and expand the line.
It's not because I'm trying to get you guys to pay more. I'll get a free one anyway. I don't give a shit.
Wow.
Oh, did I say that out loud? Oops.
You see, this is why, sometimes this is why we can't take you anywhere. This is just going to cost us more money in the end.
If it wasn't for me, quite a few optics that you guys love and enjoy would not be out now. And no, I don't suffer from humility of any sort, fake or otherwise. It's so also at Apex Optics. So they have their 4032, the original scope. That's a pretty decent scope. 2 new models were introduced, 3 to 15 by 50 or 44. kind of a front focal plane hunting type scope. I actually really like that one.
Yes, that was a good one too.
And a low power variable 1 to 10 by 24. The low power variable is perfectly reasonable scope, but it's sort of a Me Too design. The crossover hunting 3 to 15 by 44, good Japanese glass, reasonable, still theoretical, but smaller than a competition scope. I think they'll do well with that one. So I'm going to try to get my hands on a 3 to 15 and on the binocular. And especially the binocular, it'll be in every one of my videos and articles to help them. Well-conceived products should be encouraged. We want these guys to make money and make more products than we like. And if Apex is the company that really listens to shooters, let's encourage them to do more of that. Basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved the reticle that was in that 3 to 15. I actually mentioned to one of the guys that they should also consider that as an additional offering in their bigger scope. I think that reticle was really well done.
Yeah, it was a half miliradian based reticle, but the way they sized everything was just right.
No, I think that one was a 0.25.
Oh, quarter, yeah. I'm sorry, that was 0.25. The competition
was a 0.25. Yeah, I remember because I said something about it being similar to the PR2 in the Leupold Mark 5. But yeah, I think as an additional offering for all the people that are looking at 0.25s reticles, like the Leupold Mark 5 and stuff, I think that could do really well for them in their bigger scope. But the 3 to 15 was really nice. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's actually a good point. I need to shoot them an email and see when they have production models. But so Apex, I'm very friendly with a lot of different optics companies, right? But I'm always going out and looking at some smaller ones to see, because they are usually more agile, more willing to take some risks. They don't need to sell a million scopes for a particular product to make sense, right? So I'm looking at Element, I'm looking at Apex, there are a couple others here and there. And I'm hoping that more people will take risks on smallish companies like this. So there's always a risk they'll go under and your warranty will not exist. There is a risk. But on the other hand, these are the guys who might march to a beat of a somewhat different drum and get you something that we will not be able to get out of Vortex, Leupold, Zeiss, etc. So just keep that in mind. Mr. Ford Cobra ordered the Schmidt & Bender 6 to 36 with 0.05 mil reticle. There you go. So Schmidt caters to that. Good for that. Mr. Bike Tured. Will you become Dark Lord of Iron Sights now that New Mexico forbids optics and muzzle loader hunts? For fuck's sake. Yes. So my muzzle loader is from Arrowhead Rifles out in Arizona. They already have sort of peep sight that they can install. I'm going to make my way over and get my muzzle loader fitted with iron fucking sights. Happy now?
Welcome back to the 1800s. It's great.
So all jokes aside, I shoot a lot with iron sights. Mostly I have a couple of, 3. Out of the 3,000 in existence, I have 3, most in 2876 competition rifles that the Finns used. You may have seen mine at some point.
Yeah, I remember. They're very nice.
I have 3 of them, 2 that iron sights, only one that actually has a scope base, so I have an optic on it. But I shoot that one of the iron sights out to 800 yards quite regularly in reasonable light. It's not too bad. As I get older, shooting irons in the dark becomes a shit show. So I'll need to see what kind of sights Arrowhead puts on and see if I can figure out how to use them better. But with some half-assed reasonable lighting on a game animal, I should be fine with irons up to maybe 300. So unless, of course, I become older, and to the best of my knowledge, nobody gets younger with age. So. But thank you for reminding me. I do appreciate that. Okay, that's for you. Thoughts on the new J. Allen chassis by MDT?
Yeah, I mean, so I have one of the original J. Allen chassis, and I shot it in competition for a while, and I like them. They are very comfortable, but so MDT didn't really change the design a lot from the original, so it's still lacking a lot of the newer sort of features and things you look for from a competition chassis. But as a general purpose shooting chassis, I like it. It's very comfortable, especially from the prone, especially if you're going to build something on a long action, you know, like a 300 Norma, 300 PRC, stuff like that. I think it's great. Prone, I think it's very, very comfortable. One of the most comfortable stocks or chassis that I've shot. But it's in a weird place because it's really expensive. It's too heavy to hunt with, really, because it's like 6.5 pounds. So you'd even with really light components, you'd be pushing like a 16-pound gun, 15-pound gun. And again, you can shoot it in competition, but it won't be ultra competitive because it's lacking some of the other features like a proper barricade stop, and some, you know, other things like that. But it can be done. And I mean, it's one of those that I think it's a really good looking chassis stock. So if you like the look and, you know, you're just out there to shoot a match and have fun, or if you just want to build a long range gun on it, then go for it, man. They are, again, they are expensive, and they didn't really decrease the price point from the original J. Allen price point. So they're definitely on the higher end of, actually, I think they're probably one of the most expensive chassis on the market right now. But there's nothing wrong with them. They're just, the design is a little long in the tooth. I would say that it's kind of equivalent to what the Schmidt Bender 5-25 was a couple years ago, where it was a bit long in the tooth, still performed pretty well, but needed a few updates to keep up. And obviously Schmidt has done that, not only with their 5-25, but with the 6-36. So I don't see MDT totally redesigning it, but I did hear some rumblings that they could make some additional modifications to it to make it a little more up to date.
Interesting. So let's do a quick aside, because I don't know as much about different chassis as you do. On my rimfire, I have the XLR, was it Element 4.0?
Yeah.
And which I bought basically after you and I went to, you know, PRS, NRL Expo, the first one, and I liked it.
Yeah.
So I bought one for my Tika. And I find it very, very comfortable. You know, shoots well, etc. I looked at a few here and there. So on the lower end, there are big differences. And MDT actually introduced like a $400 chassis.
Yeah.
To compete presumably with KRG Bravo. On the high end, I'm looking at this going, okay, so they all have replaceable grips, so you can put the grip that you want. They all have adjustable com. They all have adjustable butt plate. They all have forehands that either have built-in M-lock and a bunch of built-in, Arca rail and a bunch of M-lock slots, so you can add barricades, stops, and all sorts of other shit on it. Given all that, what's the difference between all of them, other than price and a name?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we're in an area of, I would say, an era, I guess, of chassis and stocks where a lot of them are sort of copying each other. It's kind of one of those, like that meme that goes like, oh, let me copy your homework. Yeah, okay, here, go ahead, but change a couple of the answers so it doesn't look exactly the same. And that's kind of where we're at now. Now, granted, you know, if you ask these companies, a lot of the price increase comes with just the pure, simple fact that materials are costing more these days than what they used to. Essentially now, each chassis has a little something here and a little something there that differentiates it. So, for example, a few of the big players, I'll just give you the big three, essentially. You're looking at, so KRG with their new C4, MDT with the new ACC Elite, and then MPA with the Matrix Pro. So, real quick, on the KRG4, which I have one, the most interesting part of that design, because they've all got integrated Arca rails and a really long forend, is the magwell adjustment. So in competition shooting, feeding a rifle, especially when you start shooting really small stubby cases like a 6BR or 6-dasher, things like that, feeding can be a bit finicky, right? Almost like with a 22, you put pressure on a 22 mag, and you can get a misfeed in there, especially if a chassis is not able to really stabilize the magazine. You got a really loose fit. So what KRG did was, in the design of the magwell, it actually has 3 different areas of adjustment. So number 1 is the mag latch height. So depending on what action you're using and what magazine you're using, so that combo requires different heights. So they actually have a mag latch that is user adjustable with 2 spring-loaded screws, so they won't back out on you, and they have notches to indicate what level you're at. So, you know, are you on 1, 2, 3, etc. So that's the first adjustment. The second adjustment is they've got a block that sits at the front end of the mag well, and you can adjust that block back and forth for a fit fore and aft. So you can really squeeze the magazine down in there. And then they have 2 spring leafs that sit on the side so that you can adjust the sideways play in the magazine as well. So you can really get that magazine to fit in there as tight and as snug as you want. So there's no rattling around. There's no, oh, I've got some upward pressure or some downward pressure on the mag and it makes it misfeed, things like that. So that to me sets KRG apart, because they're the only one with all 3 of those. MDT has 2. They have the adjustable mag latch height, and they've got the fore and aft adjustment, but it's a different design and not quite as adjustable in the front, because they use, essentially they just give you two rods or spacers that you stack in there. And so if you're in between spacers or something like that, you can't get exact fit. Whereas KRG, they have 2 screws that you unscrew and they protrude. They make the plate push out, essentially. So if you have your mag well and then the insert, the 2 screws push the insert out this way so it won't move. And then you have MPA Matrix, which they don't have any adjustment except the mag latch height, which is not as nearly as a in-depth design as the other 2. But what they did was something interesting. So they have a spring-loaded buttstock. So if you're shooting at angles, high angle, low angle, and their thinking is, okay, you get down there and you realize, oh, I need more rear height because I'm looking at the sky. My bipod is too tall, right? Then instead of getting off your gun, because they have really long forends and you can't reach, so instead of getting off your gun, adjusting your bipod, and then coming back, you push a button, and the butt pad, the bag rider essentially drops down. It's spring loaded, and it has, I believe, like 120 MOA, or what equates to 120 MOA of adjustment in there. So now instead of, oh, I don't have enough, I have too much bipod, I can just quickly spring loaded raise the back end, and now I'm even. Now I'm able to shoot.
That makes sense. Okay, so there are some differences, but that compared to the minor.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I say, you know, with chassis now, it's a little bit of, everybody's got something similar. They all have adjustable mag wells. It's just how adjustable do you want to get? Mm-hmm. And then little things, you know, like I said, the spring loaded on the MPA, the ACC has stackable night vision bridges, so you can get the length of the night vision bridge.
I'm gonna go do something. I'll let you talk about chassis. I'll be back in a second.
No problem. Yeah, so the MDT has stackable night vision sections so that you can make it a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or the whole thing covered, however you want. So they're doing that. That's unique. And then another thing that KRG is doing is they have something similar with the bag rider, but theirs is just gravity based. So it's a thumb wheel that locks down 2 posts. So the bag rider sits on 2 posts. So as soon as you let it down or unscrew the thumb wheel, the bag rider will just drop down. And so you would essentially just use pressure to set it where you want and then tighten down the thumb wheel. But yeah, so, you know, those are all some of the main differences as far as what differentiates the chassis. And shameless plug, but I am currently working on my KRG C4 review right now. That's what I'm shooting. And then I am also doing an MPA Matrix Pro review, and maybe at some point I'll do an ACC Elite review, but I need to get my hands on one. I don't currently have one. And yeah, I mean, you know, I think for the most part, all chassis are really good these days, at least from the top end manufacturers. So I think it's very 6 of one, half dozen of the other. you got all of those three are all non-folding chassis, but you have something like the KRG that's built from one solid piece all the way from fore end to butt plate, whereas the MPA is two pieces and you can unscrew the buttstock if you want. Same thing with the MDT. So just little differences like that, but it's
No, that makes sense. So I'll be honest with you, full-blown competition chess, I didn't even look at them very carefully. There are a few specific ones I like, but not for competition. MDT's Hunt 26, the ultra lightweight carbon fiber thing is really impressive.
So that's one that I want to look at.
Yeah, I'm still thinking about building a ship gun for myself using that. But on the other hand, for hunting, I hunt with a fixed most, which is chassis looking guns, not really a chassis. But there is something to be said about good quality stocks like Macmillan's and others. I might build one with that. We'll see. So we don't have any more questions, which is unusual. I think we wore them out last year. People haven't yet recovered. So let's just talk a little bit about different companies we saw. And since we were just talking about chassis and adjustments, let's talk about Voodoo.
Yes.
Anything you'd like to say about Voodoo?
I'm excited, man. I'm excited for Voodoo. So, first things first is their center fire rifle. And I know that
with it.
I know it's a sticking point for you. I know. But so the action is basically the American Rifle Company coup de grace action. It's going to be OEM'd by them, and it's called the Morpheus. And they're going to do prefits, barreled actions, and full-blown custom builds. They had it there with a foundation stock, which I love foundation stocks. They're made out of micarta, which I think is unique and different, but gives them a really good look, a very solid feel. And they have a very unique recoil signature, unlike anything else. Even because I have a Manners, I've had several, and I still currently have a Manners, a very lightweight Manners. Their LRH hunting stock weighs like 2 pounds, and I've had their competition models. And then when I had my foundation, even between those two, I could tell the recoil difference. But nonetheless, I was super excited for that, to see them jump into the centerfire game, because a Voodoo 22, if you can ask anybody that's serious about 22 shooting, the Voodoo 22 is the pinnacle of 22s as far as accuracy and performance. Now, I'm not saying that others don't shoot. Rimex is also very, very nice and has some advantages over a Voodoo, but also Voodoo has some advantages. And then, Tikas are a great budget option, but all the most serious competitors that I would venture to say in the 22 game, they're all shooting Voodoos, and that's not for no reason. And then the 1911s. Oh man, those things were sweet. Now, I don't have any more 1911s. I sold them all because after a while, I just stopped, man. They're so finicky and such a pain in the ass. They look great and they shoot amazing. And to me, nothing will beat a good 1911 trigger in a handgun. But it's taking it apart to clean it and all this other shit is just not something that I necessarily want to do all the time. So I don't have any more, but one of those is definitely on the list. Definitely. I mean, yeah, I'll let you touch on that, because you got the full blown.
Well, I've known about it for months, so
okay.
It was very hard to keep my mouth shut. I'm very friendly with a couple of guys at Voodoo. I don't have their 22. I have their 17 HMR.
Yes.
And they were. I have I did only a couple of videos at Shot. I did do a video with Voodoo. It'll come out in a couple of days. I need to edit it. But I tell you, when I bought the 17 HMR from them, yes, I actually paid for something. When I bought the 17 HMR from them,
I dare not ask if you paid full price or not.
I paid dealer price, but it's still a lot of money. But they were apologizing that it's not going to be super accurate because there is no 17 HMR match ammo. Those people are liars. Don't believe a word they say. That thing is stupid accurate. I don't know what would be better with match ammo. It's just ridiculous. With the 1911, they did something very, very clever. So the picture that you see in front of you, what they did, they start with two pieces of metal, which are essentially two halves of a 1911 frame, essentially split down the middle, like mirror images of each other. That's what you see. And because it's open like that, they're able to machine it with incredible tolerances. And then they basically laser weld it back together, which you can do with also incredible precision. So they can do these incredibly precise cuts and machining on 1911 and doesn't require a whole lot of hand fitting. Basically, the assembly and fitting on their 1911 is a couple hours.
Yeah, I remember them saying that.
Custom 1911, it's like 20 hours. So it's pretty ridiculous. They will smooth as glass. I'm not a 1911 guy, and I want one. Like as far as I'm concerned, traditionally speaking, 1911 is how you learn to do malfunction clearances, right?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
To be fair, high quality 1911s are pretty good if you occasionally clean them. My buddy Alex has a Les Baer that hasn't
those are
jammed
awesome.
in a decade or something like that. There are nice 1911s out there, but I'm not a huge fan.
Nighthawks are really good.
I want that one, and I'm gonna get that one. So they have a double stack, a single stack, 45 and a 9mm single stack, and they have a 22 conversion kit, basically marble conversion kit. So at some point they're gonna offer this whole 1911 with the conversion kit. I'm just gonna get that, and I'm done with 1911s. It's not gonna get better.
Right. Yeah. So I was excited to see the double stack. I thought that was really cool. They had a particular model there, and I'm not sure how they plan on selling these, if it's going to be by model name or if it's going to be a custom order or what the deal is going to be. But they had one there that was called, I believe it was called the Priest, which was the double stack. Correct. And that one was the one that I was like, I need one of those.
It was really interesting at the range day in the beginning of SHOT Show. There's a company called Oracle who did this 2311. It's basically a double stack 1911 type gun with presumably some improvements and all that. Takes SIG P320 magazines. It had a lot of hoopla and marketing, and so there were three of them. They're all three jammed. So, but for other people, they didn't. So we'll see how that goes. I'm not sure I care about the double stack 1911. I'm not going to carry that gun. I'm not going to hunt with it. It's for me to go to the range and have fun. And the single stack grip was a little bit more comfortable for me.
That's fair. That's very fair.
But to be fair, I don't have very big hands, and this double stack 1911 actually fit me adequately well. But the single stack was still better, so I'm thinking about that. As far as the rifle, the centerfire rifle that Will mentioned a moment ago, they have one in 6.5 PRC. I've been thinking of building my sheep gun for myself. If I decide to do it in 6.5 PRC, I might swallow my objections and get one.
I mean, listen, from a performance perspective, I don't think you'll be disappointed.
Look, just like with chassis, if you're willing to spend roughly that amount of money, it's very hard to throw a rock and not hit an ultra-accurate bolt gun, okay?
It's fair.
I mean, what is it? The one you shoot with Curtis something, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Not a bad
Curtis,
option. Yeah. There's this Lone Peak stuff.
Yep. Yeah. Love the Lone Peak stuff.
Fusion TI for hunting gun, right? So.
Yep. I love the Lone Peak stuff.
So it's going to come down to the caliber choice. If I decide to do 6.5 PRC, I might do it with guys from Voodoo just because they're good people. If I decide to do 7 PRC, I might do something else because I need a medium length action. They, for now, only have a short length action. Fits in the Remington 700 footprint. Takes all the right triggers and all that. All the short action Remington 700 pattern stocks and stuff like that. And you can be confident that if it comes out from these guys, it's going to be, everything's going to be fitted well. It's going to be accurate.
Oh yeah.
So it's interesting when we're talking about the chassis, you were talking about adjusting magwell and all that. Apparently with 22s, there are some issues with that as well. So Voodoo has a new magazine for their 22s. It has an adjustment screw that adjusts the position of the latch so you can exactly tune it to your chassis action and everything. And to me, that was actually very, very clever. So with my Voodoo, I don't have to do it because I got the whole rifle from them, and whatever Voodoo they did at the factory, they already did it. I don't need to do anything. I just need to go shoot.
Yeah,
I need to clean this thing once in a while, but not too much, so I don't screw anything up and go shoot. But if
Yeah.
I was getting a Voodoo action, trying to put it into something else, this adjustable magazine is really cool. And you basically pop it in. There is an opening in the bottom. You insert a screwdriver in there, turn the screw until it's done. That's it. And you just custom fitted your magazine to your chassis in action. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think that's really cool, really clever on their part. And I think that I'm also not to go back on it, but I'm also really excited for the fact that they're doing the 9mm 1911.
Yeah,
not too many people have done a
single
9mm.
stack, and double stack is 9mm only.
Yeah, I like the fact that they're going to do a 9. That's really exciting. But yeah, I mean, Voodoo, they do top quality stuff no matter what they do, and I don't foresee any issues with their 1911s, their centerfire, or these new magazines at all. They had a really good booth.
And it was kind of funny. So I'm standing there with Greg Roman, and Greg Roman has been at my show. Some of you guys may remember him. You know, we are doing a video interview and all that sort of stuff. Some dude walks right by me, stands right behind me, starts having a loud conversation with somebody. I take a glance, Rob let him. So I decided not to argue with him. He can shoot faster than I can.
Okay, yeah.
Just in case. But that's so you'll see him in the video standing right behind me having a very animated discussion. So that was kind of interesting. As far as the accuracy of Voodoo rimfire rifles goes, with the 22s, I will say this. So my brother turned 50 last year, and I, as a birthday gift, I gave him an Anschutz bolt gun 22 and a nice JRS stock with a March 42 on it.
Wow.
I only have one brother. The biggest reason I gave him an Anschutz is that I'm gonna get a Voodoo, and I wanted to make sure I have a more accurate 22. So that's how accurate these stupid things are.
Yeah. Yeah, ridiculous. Ridiculous. To this day, and I could be wrong, but to this day, I don't think that the NRL 22 championship has been won with anything other than a Voodoo.
Wasn't there one Remax?
I'm not sure. Well, so I know Chris Simmons won the last two.
No, Chris is a Voodoo shooter, yeah.
Yeah, he won the last two with Voodoo.
Matches have been won with Remax. I don't know if the whole thing has been won with Remax.
Yeah, for sure. And don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to bash on Remax. They're also very good. And I do think that the fact that you can do pre-fit barrels, for those of you that like to do that, Remax does give you that option where unfortunately with Voodoo you can't. But yeah, I mean, Voodoos are just dumb accurate, especially if you do the Leupold testing, send it out.
Yeah,
do all the testing for you.
A couple times.
Yeah, insane.
Yeah, that's another thing that my brother got 10,000 rounds of matched Leupold ammo for his entrance.
Yeah, just got to get out and shoot it. That's easy.
I'm not looking to adopt, so don't get your hopes. But anyhow, now that I'm done showing off, I'm still gonna have a more accurate 22 eventually. I looked at it very carefully. The way Voodoo feeds the cartridge, the way they pick up the cartridge from the magazine and shove it into the chamber, the bullet is completely undisturbed. It's very impressive how it's done. That's probably the biggest reason why it is as accurate as it is. There may be other tricks, but that's the only thing I could clearly see from the outside. We don't have a question here on Zeiss. What are your thoughts on a Zeiss S5? The mill reticle looks good.
Okay, so I stopped by the Zeiss booth, and I saw the S5, and I saw the S3. And to be honest, outside of SHOT Show, I don't have a whole lot of experience with it. I haven't had a chance to personally look at one. I don't know anybody that has one, at least around me, that I can, take it for a spin at the range or anything like that. I haven't seen one at my matches. What I will say about the S5, though, so I think the reticle looks nice. What I don't like is, and it's more of a perception thing, but I don't like how complicated the elevation turret looks. There's just a lot going on with it in terms of like what they put on it, because they've got they've got like these like a line separating the second rotation numbers and like a underline almost. So that kind of throws me off a little bit. And then the fact that each full mill is like an arrow pointing down also kind of throws me off a little bit, just because it like looks different. So it looks like there's a lot going on with that elevation turret, even though essentially there's not. But I just feel like it could have been a little bit simpler, like just making the full mill marks, like instead of an arrow pointing down, just make them a thick line like everybody else. But I guess you got to be different somehow. And I don't need an underline on my second rotation numbers. That just to me is like a little bit of extra clutter that I can do without, personally. But that's just me.
So here's the picture from SHOT Show. The scope all the way on the right is the S5, and the other ones that are more in focus look like S3.
Yes.
Notice how huge that saddle is under the turrets on the S5.
Yeah.
It is really big. It's a little bit ungainly looking. But the scopes themselves are quite good. I did test a 3.3 to 18x50 last year, and I liked the scope a lot. I did not like the enormous turrets and all sort of jazz. That turret saddle, that little round thing that turrets are going to, is so big that there was some single piece mounts I couldn't use with this scope because they just wouldn't fit in terms of clearance in the bottom, right?
Mm-hmm.
The newer S3s, which are Japanese-made scopes, they're entirely different. That's what you see there on the left. They have much more reasonable turret box. S5 is a good scope. I looked at it. I did my comparison of 50mm scopes. It was a high-end tactical installment number 7 already, something like that. And so you could see that there are a couple of videos and all that sort of stuff. Optically, it was good. Mechanically, it was good. Everything tracked. Field of view was a little bit on the narrow side, but on the other hand, reticle illumination and the diffractive reticle was done really, really well. It's a very, very competitive design. If the reticle works for you and you feel you're okay with the field of view, there's nothing really wrong with it. The S3 scopes are new. I have not tested them yet. I plan to. I chatted a little bit with the guys at Zeiss, and I need to get my hands on them. They say they want feedback, so let's see how honestly do they really want that feedback. My usual disclaimer. I gave my usual disclaimer. Nobody fainted, so so far so good.
Well, that's good because
don't laugh. You've been there with me. Every once in a while, I do my disclaimer, and people go like, "Ooh, okay, where's the exit?"
Yeah,
and I honestly, I cannot blame them. So, so S3s are Japanese scopes made by Light Optics Works, and they seem to be based on the same core designs that quite a few other scopes that are coming out are based on, 6-36x56 and the 4-25x50.
Mm-hmm.
And Zeiss says theirs are a little bit different. And I can't tell. From inside the SHOT Show, these kind of differences I can't tell. They look a little bit different. They have their own reticles. The turrets seem pretty good. Optical quality looks perfectly respectable. So if I were to make a guess on a 6-36, it should be, we'll need to see how it compares to basically Element Theos and the Razor Gen 3. I mean, it's about $2,700, something, 26, somewhere there.
Yeah.
So, it's between 2.5 and 3. That's the competition. Which are all variants, kind of, not identical scopes, I think, but they're kind of like second cousins, third cousins. I know Vortex is different. I don't know if Theos and Zeiss are similar. Turrets are definitely different. But Zeiss wants to play. We'll see. Time will tell. I'd like to look at them. Hopefully both of them, at least one. And the 4-25 has a ton of adjustment, but there'll be 2 or 3 other models from other manufacturers coming out based on the same core design with lots of adjustment. We'll see.
Yeah, and I like Zeiss as a whole. They have some laser range finding binos with ballistics built in that are pretty interesting. But as far as this is kind of their first entry with the S5 and the S3 into more tactical scopes. I wish them the best, and I hope they do well, and I hope they do better than what ended up being of the Leica PBR or PRB, whatever PRS. It was. PRS. The
scope's called PRS. The PRB was the reticle.
The reticle, yeah.
I did not especially like. And now the guy at what's his name? The guy who did the PRB reticle for them. Who does all the
Cal.
statistics of Cal.
Yeah, Cal.
That's sort of stopped talking to me, I think. I didn't mean to
Yeah.
upset him, but what hell am I supposed to do? It's a shitty reticle, basically.
Yeah, and nowadays it's been a long time since I've seen one of those scopes on the line, and I mean, I shoot a lot of matches, and I'm a gear nerd, so I'm paying attention to what guys are running. Like, you know, at the other end of the line, I'm always just curious, just walking by, staring at what I see, and it's been a long time since I've seen one of those. So I'm gonna go on a short limb and say that scope didn't do entirely all that well for them. So I hope that this venture fares better for Zeiss than it did for Leica.
I hope so. So I will say this: so PRS, Leica PRS scope is still available. With an L ballistic reticle, simple mil hash reticle, it's actually pretty nice scope. I don't think they marketed it well. I don't think they understood who it's going to. And no matter how weird of a reticle you want, if you want horrors, you want something, one of the things that, and we'll see if you agree with me. I'm going to postulate something, and you tell me if you agree. One of the things we know for a fact right now, if you want to play in this long-range practical precision market, once the basic optomechanical qualities of the scope have been satisfied, you need a minimum of 2 reticles. You need a mil hash reticle without a tree, that's 0.2 or 0.25 graduations, reasonably small floating dot or floating cross. And you need a version of that same reticle that adds a 10 or 12 milliradian tree. Whether anybody uses it or not, I really don't know. But that's how the majority of these are sold. I would say it's a 70-30 split between the tree reticle and the non-tree reticle. If you want to get weird, or if you are trying to get military contracts, you can pay Horus some money, put a Tremor 28,000 in it, or whatever the hell they're on, or something like that. And that's going to, confuse some gullible military guys and that kind of stuff. In the practical precision world, you need a modern 3 reticle and a modern mil hash reticle. And without having those 2 as a minimum, you will not succeed, basically. And PRB reticle is not a modern 3 reticle. I don't know what it is. It's not a modern 3 reticle. You with me? Did I screw something up?
No, that's about how I'd equate it to any new optics company or any optics company that wants to play in the precision rifle game. I mean, that's a pretty good foundation to start. And
so Zeiss has 2 reticles, MOA and mil reticles. They're both 3-type reticles. They don't have a mil hash. I think it's a mistake. But just having a mil and MOA 3 reticles is probably enough. Some people don't like them very much. I actually do. I think I shot with a mil one, and I liked it.
Okay.
It was a perfectly robust reticle. It's a little bit thicker than a lot of people like, but it works well for me. And there are always going to be some people who don't like a particular reticle. You can't please everyone. It was a perfectly functional, perfectly modern reticle with Zeiss's very specific take on it, right? So if Zeiss, the catch is that this market is fickle, and you just have to grind at it for a little bit before you see success. I think they're doing all right. But I hope they don't give up too soon. It takes time to get your hooks into this market and develop some trust from the shooters.
100%.
Another thing that Zeiss did, so they revamped their V8 product line. Those are hunting scopes that I've been very pessimistic about for a long time. They made the tube a little bit smaller, 13-34 millimeters instead of 36, a couple other small changes. They actually looked really good. The 1.5 to 12 or something like that was really good. And the 1 to 8 by 24 used to have 1 to 8 by 30. 1 to 8 by 24 is better. I actually really like these high-end hunting scopes. They did something there that I think works well for them. I'm sort of cautiously optimistic about Zeiss, but once again, it's just as long as they don't expect the world bounty within the next 6 months. It's going to take a couple of years, but I think they're going about it in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for the back end of that question, how did the turrets feel? They felt fine. They felt fine. Nothing super outstanding tangent level quality, but then again, nothing really is. But perfectly usable, perfectly tactile.
Be careful. I got yelled at by Jeff from ZCO that I always say the tangent turrets are perfect. So,
well, I mean, listen, I've got a tangent here and I've got a ZCO downstairs. Listen, I love the 10 mil turn turrets. But if we're going to compare 15 and 15, because that's what the Tangent has, and that's what, my 8-40 has. Listen, there's nothing wrong with the ZCO turrets.
But they're very nice turrets. Tangent is just a better turret. There is nothing like Contact.
Yeah, I know.
And I've had my hands on pretty much every turret ever designed at this stage, I think. But anyhow, so going back to Zeiss. So S5 turrets are actually quite good. S3 turrets, I only saw them at SHOT, and they looked perfectly respectable. Had perfectly reasonable feel. Offhand, I'd say I think Element Theos turrets are better in terms of feel. But I spent a lot more time with the Element, so it's not really fair to Zeiss. I need to get those scopes out here and see. It was not bad at all. They seemed perfectly reasonable. There was some difference between Mill and MOA turrets in terms of feel. I think I slightly preferred the Mill one. But nothing in that turret would prevent me from looking at the scope. So I go to SHOT Show and I get my hands on a lot of stuff. And one of the things I do there is that I sort of build this almost mental database of what I want to test, what I want to test. I do basic pre-screening. Something looks like crap, I'm not going to waste time on it, right? I want to test the Zeiss S3s. I think they're fairly promising designs. Mr. Gilberto, who joined late, did either of you check out the new ZCO 10 mil turrets? Do you feel it is a step back from the 15 mil turrets? I'll check out your video on S5. So we talked about it earlier. I'll sort of do a summary. So no, in terms of feel, I think the 10 mil turret is the best ZCO ever made. Having 50 mil radiant per revolution is nice to have, but I think for a lot of competition use stuff like that, it's absolutely overrated. 10 is perfectly sufficient. I don't hold it against companies when they do more, like the Theos. Element Theos has 12, Tangent has 15. As long as it's articulated well, I don't care. But with the same attention to detail and all that, a 10 mil radiant per turn turret can be made better because you have wider click spacing. So for ZCO, given how competition focused they are, I think 10 mil radiant per turn turret is actually a step in the right direction.
Okay. Yeah, to me, those are the best turrets that they offer, period, point blank. And to me, honestly, having all of their scopes available, that would be the one that I would pick, is whichever one has the 10 mil per turn, because optically they're all pretty similar. But
yeah, they're very nice scopes. All my jokes about ZCO aside, they make very, very nice scopes. Let's see, we're almost at 2 hours and we only covered 4 companies. We're going to wrap up in about 10 minutes and we'll do another installment probably in a couple of weeks, so whenever Will is available again. So let's, we have 10 minutes. What do you want to bring up that really stood out to you? Because I know what I want to bring up. I'm curious if it's going to be the same thing.
So, okay, just something that I thought was really interesting, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but I think it lays sort of an interesting groundwork, because we always talk about somebody's got to be the first, right? And I took you to go see it, but MDT has an electronic trigger, which I thought was pretty innovative. Now, is there a practical application for something like that outside of true competition shooting? Probably not, I would say, but who knows what that could inspire later on down the line. But it is a true 0-stage trigger, so it's essentially just pressure. It's really weird and hard to describe, but like you apply pressure as if you're pulling the trigger, and then at some point it breaks. But like there's no reset, there's no nothing.
There's no translation to the trigger at all.
Yeah, it's a very interesting feeling the first couple times that you pull it, and it's also interesting that you can adjust the pull weight internally from the trigger as well. It is kind of funny that you have to charge your trigger. So we're charging our cell phones at night, and next to it is going to be my long ass bolt gun, plugged in. That'll be interesting. But I just think it's a cool concept.
I'm sure
whether it
the
actually
hotel is going to appreciate it.
Yeah. yeah, right. So I just think it's a cool concept, and I'm more curious to see what that inspires, later on down the line of a few years from now, and see what that turns into. I think an electronic AR trigger would be kind of nuts.
So I have a short video out. We did an interview with a guy from MDT who just talked a little about the trigger. It's kind of a short thing. It's out on my channel. Take a look. For a competition gun, it's an interesting design. So me personally, I don't like it because I like two-stage triggers. Okay. There's nothing wrong with this one. I'm just not used to this kind of stuff. But I am a terrible candidate for a trigger like this because I was once young and stupid and very, very into martial arts. Now I'm old, not much bright, and very, very into martial arts. But I did some unpleasant things to my hands. I don't have very good feel. Ultralight triggers that you guys all use, I don't even know when it breaks. So one of the reasons I like the two-stage triggers is that this first take-up stage gives me something to work with because I just don't have very good feel in my hands. So the trigger is not for me. But in terms of crispness and all that, it's quite remarkable. And one of the things it does, because there's no translation, no matter where on the trigger you put your finger, no, that's always the same feel. It's always the same pull. So for a competition gun, there are some very clever things about it. What I don't like is that potentially you can control it remotely. The government can shut it all off. They have accelerometers in it. If you tilt it too much, it won't go off for safety reasons at different ranges. All those things that the Canadian people at MDT is a Canadian company think is a good idea, I think is a bad idea. Right? A trigger has one safety. This is it. There's nothing else, as far as I'm concerned. So, and I don't like trusting to any other sort of shit. I don't like any other limitations, ramifications. If you don't want the gun to shoot, don't put your booger hook on the trigger. And if you want it to shoot, well, do the opposite. But it's nice to see somebody push the trigger and do something clever and innovative. I'm old enough to remember the clusterfuck that Remington's E-tron X, the electronic rifle, was. It was different. I think MDT is doing it in a smarter way than Remington did. It's not a very high bar to clear.
I was going to say, I'm not sure if that's saying a lot. That might be offensive. that might offend MDT in this way.
Yeah, that was really quite interesting.
And so another thing that I wanted to bring up that I thought was really cool, two things, essentially from a very similar company, I would say, is Steiner Burris. So Steiner had a dual focal plane.
M8Xi.
Yes, which I thought was really badass. And then on the Burris side of the house, I thought that sort of entry level, I don't want to call it an IFS, but it's like an entry level. Yeah, a Revic Light. I thought that was pretty cool, especially coming in at under $1,000, something super simple, super easy to use. I think there could have been a few tweaks on it. But overall, I like that entry level position for something like that. But the dual focal plane was really cool because it's been a while. So last year, I saw US Optics like 1 to 10 that was like a dual focal plane.
1.8 to 10.
Yeah, 1.8 to 10 that was a dual focal plane. I talked to the guys over there. Apparently, for whatever reason, they've kind of ceased on that project altogether. And they're not sure if or when it'll ever come to light. So I was kind of disappointed in that. But this kind of brought some of that feeling back. And I know dual focal planes are kind of, niche right now as far as what companies are doing them and who really wants to get into that game. But I think it's a pretty cool concept.
It is. So I just did an article on that. It'll be in one of the AR-15 magazines this year. There are 3 dual focal plane rifle scopes on the market today that are of high quality and all that. Schmidt & Bender Dual CC 1-8x24, this new Steiner M8Xi, and the March 1-10x24. They all kind of do the dual focal plane thing a little bit differently. It allows it's comparatively complicated to build. It allows you to do a lot of things really well if you can execute. So I spent a month and a half or so with that M8Xi late last year. We took it hunting and all sort of stuff. I really liked that scope. The mechanically very, very solid design. The Burris that Will's referring to is called Veracity PH. It's a 4-20x50. The optical system and most of the mechanical system is really from the Burris XTR2 4-20x50. So it's not the most modern optical design, but they updated at some point. It's fairly competent. And it's robust. Those scopes were absolutely bulletproof. And what they did is that basically, if you're looking through the image. I tried to take a picture. I didn't succeed in taking a good picture, but I'm gonna see if I can quickly find it. It just kind of shows you as you look through the scope. Oh, there we go. Now we're on the right day. There is a screen. As you look through the scope, there's a screen up top. And the big reason to have that screen up top there is that it's hooked up to the turrets. When you dial your turrets, the elevation turret actually does not have clicks. It's just a smooth turret. There are sensors underneath it. And that's not it. I'm on the right day. Oh, there we go. So the picture is a little bit out of focus, but it'll show you what I mean. Okay. So basically, there is a little kind of a BDC tree type reticle. The taper bars so that you can see it low magnification. There is a screen up top that is hooked up to the turrets. It can also take external inputs wirelessly and all sorts of other stuff. The big thing with this, like with Revit, like with Steiner IFS, once you line up behind the scope, if you need to dial your turret, you dial your turret. You never need to look at the turret. The screen on the inside will tell you exactly where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that allows you to not look away from the scope is a good thing. Okay, you don't have to break position. You don't have to confirm anything. It is really cool, and they're doing it under $1,000, and that's
impressive.
That is a big deal. So another thing that Burris kind of had there under the table, they redesigned their thermals. They should be announcing them in the next week or two. I have a picture somewhere. Basically, completely restyled, longer battery life and all that, but similar imaging core, just somewhat better optimized. So that was pretty cool. Steiner had a new Mark IV flashlight, which I really liked. Very, very uniform illumination. That was a nice flashlight. Steiner is generally an interesting company. Like they attack it, they illuminate his lasers, flashlights, a lot of different sites that done really, really well. And then there's Steiner marketing.
Yeah, there was a couple things that we talked about with them that just kind of made.
We're not gonna let that out for now, but I'm just You gotta be fucking kidding me.
Yeah. Yeah,
it was. So I'm really friendly with their CTO. So the guy you and I talked to, he's the chief technology officer for all of optical things for Beretta Defense Group, right?
Okay.
And he's hitting his head against the wall. Guys, you got to be kidding me, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
There's a few. There was a few head scratchers. I'll say.
Yeah. So let me put it this way: when we were, the gentleman and I were just chatting. Will is standing there, and I've seen Will before. They know he's going to keep his mouth shut, so we're just having a conversation. And at some point, I see Will's eyes kind of look like if you tell Will about the windage turret on the Mark V, like kind of that look.
Mm-hmm.
Like, say what? Like,
yeah.
Why would you do such a thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I hope they see the light. But Burris Steiner is one of the companies I like. They're quietly doing clever things. I should be finally getting XTR Pro and XTR 3 illuminated here to look at shortly.
Very nice.
I have to go to Europe for work sometime in late spring. I'm probably going to go swing by Germany and do a factory tour at Steiner.
Oh, that'd be cool.
They're in southern Germany. Southern Germany, unlike northern Germany, has two things that I find really important: good food and sense of humor. So don't tell the Austrians I said that. But anyhow, I'm gonna try to go visit them. Good people. They have clever ideas.
Mm-hmm.
They have things coming up that are worth paying attention to. I went there again on the last day, so they had some more stuff under the counter that I thought was very, very good. Steiner does have a new line of scopes called Predator 8. They're hunting second focal plate scopes that I thought were really, really quite good. 2 to 16 by 42, 3 to 24 by 50, and 4 to 32 by 56, I think. With very clever, very innovative turrets that have kind of this plastic cover and very interesting things happening underneath. You can see revolutions, preset BDC marks, all sorts of smart things. Yeah. One of the companies that I thought you'd bring up is actually Revit.
Oh,
I even tried to give you a hint when I said Revit Lite, but you were not budging. So there is a new Revit Gen 2, but it was under the counter, and they politely asked me to not share pictures or specifications or any real
Yeah, that's
information
the
on
only
it.
reason I didn't bring it up, because that was one of the more exciting things.
Yeah, other than the
For
fact that
sure.
it's coming, I can't really say anything about it, but I'm supposed to have one here toward March, April. And hopefully they'll be able to send me one before they do the official release, and I'll try to kick off sort of a first look video. I like where they're going with the Revit Gen 2. I think it's the right direction. I think they will do well with it. I will say that.
Yeah.
Almost as exciting was the freaking Revit bipod, and that one they had out, so we could actually talk about it. Although it's not officially released, but at least they had it on top of the counter.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you liked it. It's more of a hunting bipod. I thought it was the cleverest thing ever.
Yeah, I mean, so again, I think looking at it from a use case, right? So obviously for competition, probably not so much, but from a practical and a hunting standpoint, I think so Revit and Gunworks in general, Gunworks mostly gets a lot of flack, right, for like overpriced like hunting guns and things like that. That's what a lot of the criticism was for, right? And I can see the argument in that, you know, 10K for what's essentially a hunting rifle in your choice with some hand-loaded ammo. I don't know. It is expensive. But
and the colors K318, don't forget.
Yeah, absolutely. The holy grail of scopes. It's got to be the best thing ever, right? Yeah, so I don't necessarily I don't necessarily disagree with some of that criticism, but what I do like about Gunworks is that in other areas, they really push the envelope, and they're one of those companies that Ilya mentioned earlier is kind of agile in a way where they have the ability to go in other directions with a lot of other things. So like the Revit scope, for example, so the Gen 1 Revit was like a $5 million R&D project for them to finally get it to market at some point. So something like that is obviously not something that we've seen from bigger companies like Vortex, Leupold, and all that. So they
just don't tell you how much the R&D costs.
Well, fair, but even just that concept of a scope, like a ballistically integrated scope, right? And then
heard of
now
XM157, right?
Yes, but a totally different type of deal. I mean, now this is that's next level. That looks down at the Revit and says, "What are you? You're from 2000, right?"
Yes, it looks down at the Revit and everything else really and says, "Say, uncle."
Yeah,
but we can't buy it yet, and we may have some competition for it. We'll talk about that next.
Yeah, but so going back to Gunworks and Revit, so things like a bipod. I know that their spotter is essentially a rebranded Vortex spotter, but I actually like the Revit. So they have an insert for reticle. So it's a fixed 22 power. You can change the eyepiece. I actually like their reticle a little bit better than the Vortex version. But just little things like that I can appreciate from them, where they have maneuverability to go in different directions. So like them jumping into the bipod game is kind of surprising, I think, because it's somewhat of a crowded market. But I do think that their design and other things like that are cool. Like I really applaud them for jumping into that ring.
So I'm sorry, are you done?
Yeah.
Or am I interrupting you? I will agree and disagree with you.
Okay.
I would not necessarily call Revit agile. It takes them a while. What I will say is that they're willing to take risks and do their own thing, and I have a ton of respect for that. I think that's very important. As far as the general criticism of Revit and Gunworks, their shit is expensive. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never seen a Gunworks rifle that doesn't shoot. And unlike a lot of people out there, they take a system-level approach to everything. That's why they prefer to provide the whole system. Partly because they make more money that way, partly because they cater to the clientele to a significant degree who have a lot of money and not a lot of expertise. And they have to deliver the whole thing and show them how to use it and hope for good results. So that's one of the reasons why it's expensive, but it works. from that standpoint, if you look at it from a system level standpoint, them introducing their own bipod makes perfect sense, because first and foremost, they're going to bundle it with their rifles. And it is for hunt, as far as hunting bipods go, I think it is legitimately a better mousetrap. There are no weird ass controls. It hooks up to the Picatinny rail without any weird clamps, nothing. And basically you rotate it and it releases, you drop it down. The legs are double pull with gross adjustment and fine adjustment. And you can change the angles from here, you can go to here without ever getting from behind. They got lots of adjustment. It's not heavy. It's just about the right size for a hunting rifle. And honestly, it's not going to be that expensive given the complexity. I think it was like standalone around $300, $250, something like that. Which for Revik, I thought it was like, oh, wait a second, you guys, are you sure? You sure I'm in the right booth?
Yeah.
The bipod kicks ass. It's extremely clever and extremely hard to screw it up from a user standpoint. When you're doing things like this, not, there are two controls and that's pretty much it. And then just do your own thing. I'm planning to do a review on the bipod and on the new Revik scope. Hopefully, they'll be able to get them to me in a reasonable time frame. Excuse me. It sounds like they will. I think they will be. The scope was looked quite mature. I think they'll be releasing it comparatively soon, and I'm going to put it through its paces. They will, I believe, will only release at first the MOA version, because they sold a lot more MOAs with Gen 1 scopes than MIL.
Yeah, that's what they mentioned.
Although I am going to be compromising my principles, I will review the MOA version.
Yeah.
That should tell you how much I like the idea of how they did it.
Yeah, that's very fair. That's very fair. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I messed with it, and I thought I thought a lot of what they did with that, and some of the designs of some of the other I guess portions of that scope were pretty. And again, I don't want to say more than what we're allowed to, because realistically it wasn't really at SHOT Show. It was there, but it wasn't.
They were not showing it. Look, so my basic take on this is that one of the reasons I get a chance to know when a lot of things are coming in advance is that manufacturers happily talk to me, but they also know that unless they give me an okay, I'm not going to release information. Once I have the scope in my hands and I'm doing a review, they can go kiss my big fat hairy ass. I'm going to release whatever the hell I want. But pre-release, when we're just chatting, we have to keep that in confidence.
Yeah. Just know that Ilya and I are both excited. So hopefully once it's out, you guys can really appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah, I think it's cool. And let's see, we should be wrapping up. So let's go back to element optics for a moment. Did you get a chance to see the Hyper 7?
I did not.
Okay, shame on you. 7 power prismatic scope with a full electronic reticle. All of the reticle movement generation, all sort of stuff is done electronically. There's no edged reticle, and there are no moving optical parts because of it.
Wow.
Short eye relief, like an inch and a half or so. They originally developed it for air guns and stuff. But it'll work fine on 22s, probably ARs, stuff that doesn't kick very much. They solved a couple of interesting things. So the reticle, you can pre-program 4 reticles. You can draw your own designs and upload them in there.
That was going to be one of my first questions. Correct. So electronic reticle screams to me user programmable.
User programmable. It has a bunch of environmental sensors in it and all that sort of stuff. You can hook it up to a laser rangefinder. It will do live BDC for you. And all sort of stuff. A little bit like the XM157 Lite. It's hundreds of dollars, I think.
Very, very light.
It's going to be I think it's going to be under $1,000. One of the problems with stuff that does not have an edge reticle is battery life, right? So it runs on single AAA battery, so perfectly normal battery.
Okay.
If you just turn it on and keep using it continuously, you get about 3 days or something like that. There's auto shut off, so it's it'll preserve battery. One of the things they did that was one of the most clever things, they found a way to keep the battery from leaking. If you shove the battery in there, use it for a little bit, turn it off, and walk away. When it's off, it's not draining the battery.
I like that.
Yeah, so I messed a little bit with the prototype. but it had a faulty button. I didn't spend too much time with it, but I messed with it a little bit. They were right; it does not drain the freaking battery. So I'm gonna do a full review. I think it's one of the more clever things. I talked to the guy who designed the electronic parts a little bit. He didn't tell me everything, but reading between the lines, if you give me a year, maybe 18 months, and a little bit of funding, I can take that electronic engine and essentially replicate every single functionality of the XM157 for that last month.
Wow.
Okay. I won't go into more detail than that. I do some consulting for Elements, so some of these things are, behind closed doors. I didn't do any consulting on that script right now. I'm doing some other stuff with them. But I've had a chance to look at it carefully. It is a big deal. We all like big words and stuff, talk about paradigm shifts and all that. This is a paradigm shift. Okay, and the
So
biggest,
it's a fixed 7 power?
Yeah, fixed 7 power. With compared to low IRLF. So when I get it, I'm gonna pop it on the 22 and go play with it. And then I'm gonna experiment and see. I wanted partially because I design reticles for people. Now I can program reticles and see what they look like, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
But aside from all that, so mechanically it should be spectacular robust because there's nothing moving there other than the eyepiece focus. Well, there's side focus, there's parallax, and there's eyepiece focus. But in terms of, there's no, for windage elevation, you're not moving anything left, right, sideways. So always the right on the optical path. Okay. So it can be very, very well optimized. And the company that builds it does a really, really good job. It's Optimica stuff is built in China, but nobody else uses that factory, just these guys. And they're very good. Some of the best eyepieces I've ever seen come out of China. Electronic parts are not made in China; they're made in Europe, and all gets assembled and all sort of stuff. It's programmable reticle, wireless connectivity, being able to switch reticles on the fly, which also means switching zeros and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And battery that does not drain itself when it's shut off, and commonly available battery. It's a big deal.
Okay. Yeah.
So in the meantime, once you get the connectivity done to some of the external stuff, it will basically give you 70% of what the XM157 does for the military. XM157 for Vortex is more of a system thing. It talks to a bunch of other stuff we can't have and all these sort of things. But for us, for the rest of us, fixed high quality 7 power that talks to all the environmental sensors, takes inputs from laser rangefinders, can be pre-zeroed for a bunch of things. You can do it has a ballistic engine inside the scope, and it has, let's say, temperature and altitude sensors, so it can adjust for all of that for you if you want, in terms of drops and things like that.
Okay.
It does a lot of things. The guys from Element are gonna, they've been talking about it a little bit. I'll do some videos and all that. Once I get my hands on it, I'm gonna. Maybe that will be the time to try on locals and stuff I can do on my website, on the darklordoptics.com website. I can do live streams from the range through my phone. I think where I shoot, there's enough connectivity. I might just set up the cell phone behind the scope and just go point at something downrange and run you through the functionality. It is really cool.
Yeah,
it is really cool, and it has just the right amount of flexibility to do a lot of things.
Damn, I'm kind of upset that I missed that one. I definitely should have paid a little bit more attention. That I think that would be super cool.
Mental lubrication.
Yeah, maybe.
Never go to SHOT Show sober.
Oh, man, I'd get in a lot of trouble. But
never mind. I do, but okay.
A fixed 7 power, I think, is very multi-platform. I assume that they did it in a fixed because it's much easier to do a fixed power than to put all that in a variable power.
So it's a prismatic scope because they didn't want it very long. It has fairly short relief. And that's what they started with. But that engine can be used, I believe, in other scope types with a little bit of development.
So I'd be interested to see if they did like sort of a 14 or 15x version, fixed power 14, 15, version.
It's
That would
possible.
be
So there are the same company does same OEM does
Mhm.
have, I think, either 12 or 14 power. Definitely have a 10 Pro, but I think there's also a 14 power prismatic design with side focus. But once again, very short eye relief. Look,
yeah.
let's see how it does. If
hmm
people buy it, if it is financially successful for them, I assure you that they will do more with it. But I was looking at it, go like,
Yeah.
So on your, at 14 power with nice wide field of view, good optics, with one of your, 28-pound rifles shooting something like a 17 Ackley, I mean, there's not a ton of recoil anyway.
No,
It might be viable.
100%. I'd
It's a
be
very, very different way
very
of doing things, right? So,
100%.
but it is interesting.
I would definitely be very interested in taking if they did like a fixed 14 or 15 power, something like that. I'd be very interested in taking it to a match just out of curiosity to
One of
see.
the problems with prismatics to get good field of view with any sort of eye relief, you need very large prisms. So I think the high magnification one they have is very, very short eye relief. I don't remember how short, so we'll need to take a look.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, on a 25-pound 6 Creedmoor,
yeah,
it doesn't move anyway. So what are you gonna do?
yeah. Look, I'm gonna put it in a rimfire and go mess with it,
Yeah,
and then I'll know what moves, how it moves, and I'll can progressively put it in something else. I'm not gonna put it on my 7-pound 308. I'm telling you right
yeah. Probably end up with a black eye.
now. Yeah, I just don't want to have a scope embedded in my forehead permanently.
Yeah,
All right.
that seems pretty cool though.
Yeah, it is very, very cool. So, just thinking back on what was the coolest, I wrote a little piece on it. If I remember, I'll link it in the video description on what was most memorable for me at SHOT Show, and I think we covered that. We need to,
hmm
regroup and do another one and kind of probably just go through the pictures and talk about different things. But if you're talking about the most memorable stuff, so this electronic reticle scope Hyper 7 HYPR7 from Element is
hmm
a big deal. Dual
hmm
focal plane from iRay is a very big deal.
hmm
The new Tangent 7-35, we didn't talk about it too much because everybody assumes it's going to be amazing. I really liked it, and they priced it under 6K.
Yeah, so I was a little bit surprised when they announced the actual price for it. It's surprised in a good way.
Correct.
That it wasn't as expensive as some of the initial rumors out there, which is nice. Interesting that they decided to go with a 36 mil tube. So it seems to be a completely different sort of thing from the 5 to 25. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now especially with the rise of ZCO using 36 mil tubes, I mean 36 mil rings are everywhere. So I mean that's not really an issue. And it's shorter than I thought it would be, which is
It's
interesting.
about half an inch to an inch shorter than the 5 to 25, and maybe an ounce. No, it's not
Yeah.
lighter. It's about the same weight, maybe half an ounce, maybe whatever.
And
Do
the
what show
parallax is
them
much lower though.
one at the range day, one at the show. I shot with it at the range day. It was really good. Now, to
Okay.
be fair, I don't expect anything else from Tangent, so that was
Right.
kind of the least surprising thing that Tangent is going to introduce a new $6,000 scope, and it's going to be really good. Okay.
Yeah.
But ZCO introduced an 8x40. I sort of assumed it's going to be pretty nice optically,
hmm
because if it wasn't, that'd be a lone gunshot at the headquarters in Austria, and there'd be a new CEO, right? So Tangent making a new high magnification scope is going to be pretty nice. But it was really nice. I mean, once again, I will definitely need to look at it.
hmm
And what else was good? So the Revit bipod that we just talked about for me was extremely memorable.
hmm
And the
hmm
new Schmidt stuff was good. The 6-36 looked very well worked out. That the 60 was good.
Yeah,
Schmidt
I
wants to
like the 10 to
play.
60. hmm
I'm gonna and they have a new hunting 3-18x42. I'm not planning to review 10-60. I am planning to review 6-36 front focal plane and 3-18 second focal plane, the hunting scope.
hmm
Schmidt is doing a lot of things right after a few years of being, to me, a little bit weird.
hmm
What else? So Leupold we talked about, whereas Steiner we talked about. I'm just trying to kind of do a top level thing. A couple of new
hmm
things at Right On that were not hugely memorable. They were okay. I didn't see anything crazy. Hilux, the guys that Will and I know. So
hmm
their precision scope 525x56 finally coming out. And
Okay.
1 to 10
Yep.
is going to follow it shortly. The 5 to 25 actually look pretty good. $800. It's going to be very, very competitive. Swamp Fox has. Did they have it out? Yeah, they had it out there 5 to 40 by 56. Completely redesigned, much better looking than last year. It may have a decent reticle in it, just a hunch. Call it an educated guess. A few other things here and there. Very clever new tripod, the Dome Top tripod from Field Optics Research, now available. I have one. I don't know if you remember the Dome Top tripod or not.
Yeah.
So it's finally in production. I have one of the versions. That was kind of cool looking. Arcan had their lightweight hunting scope. The 4 to 16 was not there. That's the one I cared about. So, hold on a second. There's a question. How heavy is COVERTNOOB5's rifle? Sorry if I missed it earlier. I'm trying to get back into competitions and I see things have changed. How heavy is your gun?
Just really quickly, somewhere on the lighter end, 18 pounds, and on the heavier end, 25 pounds. I've got multiple rifles that I shoot, and they're all. I personally prefer right around 20 pounds though. 25 is a little bit too heavy, and I move slower. But so average guys, average across the board, you'll see guys with like 20-pound rifles.
Okay. You should gain some weight, and you'll see that for 5 pounds in the rifle, it's not going to make any practical difference to how slow you move. Just say. Let's see. So top level, what else? Psionics introduced a digital night vision called Opsin, next generation. I'm gonna have one in a week or two, so look for a review. It is quite good. Has strengths and weaknesses compared to normal analog night vision. Once again, in a couple of weeks, I should have one here. Let's see what else. Of the things that were truly memorable, we talked about Apex. Yeah, we covered a good amount of stuff.
Yeah, Voodoo. We talked about their 1911s. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that was very, very memorable. Oh, Primary Arms. So let's do 2 moments on Primary Arms. So Primary Arms is doing a lot of things right, and most of the stuff introduced was really good, and it's something that people can actually afford. I have a couple of short videos on their new $340 low power variable with the absolute day bright fiber dot, the SLX 126 with a Nova reticle. I think they're going to make a killing with it. They have a new 5x prismatic that looked very nice, a couple of magnifiers, some other red dots that looked respectable. Within their mid-range line, the GLX, they have several new introductions for the 27 by 56, 6-power magnifier, which looks pretty decent. And what was of most interest to me, the 3 to 18 by 44. Front focal plane made in the Philippines, with really nice turrets, those turrets that Primary Arms has. I think it was under 1,000 or right around 1,000, something like that. A couple of good reticles. I have one here with a mill reticle. 175 MOA of adjustment range. 175. So for like ELR in fire and all that, now you don't have to spend that much money. So I'm gonna test it and see. 29 ounces in weight. Kind of interesting design. So PA is doing a lot of things well. Expect to see more information about those as we go along. Look at SHOT Show, what I think I'd like to do this year. There'll be some miscellaneous reviews and stuff like that. I want to do a big high-end comparison for tactical scopes with the new Tangent, Schmidt, and all that. And I want to do an across-the-board comparison for hunting scopes, maybe toward the summer, second half of the year. I've got a friend in Alaska. I might hop over to Alaska, use that during the summer, use that never-ending daylight, and set up some scopes and do some comparisons. The SHOT Show this year was not revolutionary for the most part, other than this Hyper 7 from Element. That was the most revolutionary thing, but it was very memorable. A lot of stuff is getting mature, and technically mature products are moving down the price range. All of a sudden, for prices that are significant but not nosebleeding, we can get really nice stuff. So the big question that's coming to mind now is that how will the really expensive, really fancy brands truly differentiate themselves? Will and I raised the question when we did the Vortex Razor Gen 3 overview. And I think this argument is going to move a little bit further down the line. The argument of where the sweet spot really is going to be interesting this year.
I think so. It's something that I would like to kind of take a personal interest in as far as what came out of this SHOT Show is looking more towards some of the electro optics. So you have the Revic Gen 2. Steiner IFS is largely the same, but they've updated the software. So now you can Bluetooth to a Kestrel and some of the more common devices. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then now you combined the Burris Veracity, which is like a Revic Lite.
Veracity PH. There's regular Veracity,
PH.
there's Veracity PH.
Yeah, the PH with the internal display. Those really interest me a lot because I think that those can push other companies to do similar stuff like that. And that to me is a really exciting step forward in optics. So I'd like to personally try to get one of those reviews done if I can get an IFS loaner from Steiner, and if I can get a Revic loaner. And if I can get a Revic 2.0 at some point as well.
As long
I'd
as
like
it's
to
not
have
at the
those.
expense of the one I'm getting, I'm perfectly fine with it.
Yeah.
What you're going to have to do is you're just going to have to get off your ass and come visit me in New Mexico when I have all that stuff here.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. We could definitely set something up, get to the range and everything like that.
We are not, I have the key to the range. We're not lacking space out here, and we can work that out.
Absolutely.
All right. So I think with that, we're going to wrap up. Thank you, Will, for joining me. It was a good overview.
Of course, always a pleasure.
We'll see what kind of questions we get under the video, and maybe in a couple of weeks we'll reconvene and do another couple-hour segment. I think we were more successful this year. We covered more stuff than I thought we would, which is good. And I think we covered the most interesting stuff. Although now we're going to wrap up, and I'll remember something interesting. That's how it usually works. But I think that's a wrap for today. Thank you guys for sticking with us. Thank you, Will, for having the patience and the time. And hopefully we'll all be back here in a couple of weeks. You guys have a good evening.